Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Leawood City Planning Commission. This is our meeting of September 14th, 2021. The meeting will come to order and the clerk will call the roll, please.
Commissioner McGurin.
Present.
Commissioner Coleman.
Here.
Commissioner Block.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Commissioner Hunter.
Absent.
Commissioner Belzer.
Absent.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Here.
Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Elkins.
Present. Before we move on to the business this evening, is there a motion to suspend the rules to permit Commissioner Hoyt and Commissioner Peterson to participate via the Zoom call?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Coleman.
I move to suspend certain rules of the Planning Commission due to the pandemic.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Any discussion of the motion? If not, those in favor, please indicate by responding in an affirmative fashion as I call the roll. Commissioner McGurin.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Block.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
The ayes have it on a 7-0 vote, 6-0 vote. And so the rules of the commission are suspended to permit the participation by Commissioner Hoyt and Commissioner Peterson. And I find that a quorum is present so that we can move on to the business of the evening. Mr. Sanchez, are there any changes to the agenda that was presented to the commission?
There are not.
If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Coleman.
I move to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please indicate by saying aye in response to the roll call. Commissioner McGurin.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Block.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
The ayes have it on a 6-0 vote, and the agenda is approved as it was submitted. That brings us to a review of the minutes from the August 24th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Do any commissioners have revisions or corrections to those minutes as they were submitted in draft form?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner McGurin.
on page 15, in the middle of the page under my comment, it says, I may not be a parking expert, but my theory is that there's parking available within and in front of American Century and T-Mobile. And if I counted correctly, there are 44 spots east of, and the reference is the grade area. I don't think I've used that language in my life, so I would have assumed it would have said east of the proposed restaurant. But if for some reason grade area is better, I can live with it, but I was surprised by that phrasing.
Okay, we'll accept your revision unless someone objects. Commissioner Peterson, did you have a revision as well?
Yes, on page 23, in the middle of the page where it says the motion is recommended to approve approval of case 69-20 Hills of Leawood. Is that referring to the case regarding the so-called North Restaurant?
Fair point.
Is there someone here who was at the meeting that could address Commissioner Peterson's question?
This is Commissioner Coleman. That should be case 8321, I assume. I'll look for staff to acknowledge that. Town Center Plaza, Lot 12.
It is 8321.
Great, thank you. Any other revisions? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes for the August 24th, 2021 meeting as revised?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Coleman.
I move to approve the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting for August 24th, 2021 as amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Those in favor, please indicate by an affirmative response to the roll call. Commissioner McGurin.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Block.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
The ayes have it on a 6-0 vote, and the minutes for the August 24th, 2021 meeting are approved as revised during the discussion. I note that case number 82-21 Cockrell Family Subdivision Lot 1, Heartland Enterprises, request for approval of a revised preliminary plan and revised final plan located north of 143rd Street and east of Kenneth Road has been continued to the October 5, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. That brings us to the only item of business on the commission's agenda for this evening, and that's under the category of old business. That's case number 4920, Cameron's Court, request for approval of a rezoning from Ag and SDO planned office to MXD, Mixed Use Development District, preliminary plan, preliminary plat located south of 133rd Street and west of State Line Road. Now, before we move on to staff's presentation here, I'd just like to note that this, by my count, is the fourth time that this application has come to the commission over a period of 6 different meetings. A substantial portion of each of those meetings was devoted to this plan. The commission is obviously well aware of the general nature of the application and its history. And we would encourage the applicant, when the applicant comes forward, and I'll reiterate that when the applicant comes into the room, that the applicant please focus on the changes and revisions to the plan or the last time we've seen it. The commission is well aware of the general outlines of the plan, and we're particularly interested in the changes to the plan. I would note for everyone's benefit that it is absolutely my intent that we can come to a conclusion as to a recommendation to the governing body this evening. To get there, everybody's going to have to be mindful of time. It's my intent, if at all possible, to get to the public hearing, and there are a number of members of our public who wish to be heard by no later than 7:45. So I would ask that the staff and the applicant and the commissioners for that matter, when it comes time for questions, be aware of at least where I'm hoping to head. Again, to a public hearing that starts no later than 7:45. Perhaps taking a break right at 7:45, and then on to discussion and a decision well before the hour that we're required to close under the Leawood Development Ordinance. Any questions about that plan? If not, Mr. Sanchez, does the staff have a presentation, again focusing on the changes that we're seeing this evening?
Yes, we do.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, this is case 49-20, Cameron's Court. Request for approval of a preliminary plan, preliminary plat, and rezoning to MXD. On the dais, you'll see some additional comments made from the public since the packets were delivered to the commission on Friday. So these are the same comments that you received yesterday and today in your emails. So the commissioners that are participating by Zoom should also have these. So the last time this project was before you on July 13th, 2021, the commission then had a recommendation of denial to the governing body. At the governing body meeting, the applicant then requested to remand the project back to the planning commission again to make additional changes to the plan, which would then further the plans into compliance with the 135th Street Community Plan and to the Leawood Development Ordinance. So since the latest governing body remand, the applicant has made a few changes, and I'd like to show an example up on the monitor. So really with this application, there were 3 major changes that happened. Along 133rd Street, these used to be townhouse units, residential units. Those are now turned into single-family dwelling units. So I believe that there were 38 dwelling units, and the last one are 19 actual duplexes. These have 29 single-family residential units. Also on this plan, within the Tract 5, there was a convenience store / gas station on that northeast corner of the site that has now been changed to a drive-through restaurant. And another big change is the drive that was at the location of Kenneth Road actually shifted to the east to now totally be within the project area of the property owner. So those were really the three big changes that happened since the last submittal of the plan. So in total, the project will consist of 953 dwelling units, a 100-unit assisted living facility, and approximately 412,000 square feet of commercial space on approximately 16 acres. The project is still broken up into 5 different phases, starting with the single-family homes along 133rd Street, and the commercial portion of the development along State Line Road would be completed as the last 2 phases. The applicant is also requesting deviations to the submittal for a residential discount of 50%, as well as a deviation to the setbacks for buildings along 135th Street, High Drive, and Pawnee Lane to be reduced from 40 feet to 30 feet as allowed by the Leawood Development Ordinance, as long as open space is compensated at a rate of 1-to-1. As the plan has continued through the process, each stage has brought the project closer and closer to compliance with the Leawood Development Ordinance and the recommendations of the 135th Street Community Plan. Staff is recommending approval of case 49-20 with the stipulations listed in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Questions for Mr. Sanchez? Ricky, I have just one question. There's a lot of discussion in the commentary, and I'm sure we'll have even more discussion tonight about the relationship between the eastern part, which appears to be primarily commercial development, and the western part of the application, which is almost completely, there is still some commercial there, but much larger percentage of residential. If we were to be considering this case just on the basis of the western portion, what would the density be? And part 2 is how would that compare to what's permitted under the LDO for density in that space?
Sure. So currently, as a whole, the entire development is currently at around 8.41 density dwelling units per acre. So if you were to break it up between west and east, on the west side where it's mostly residential, you'd be looking at around 12 units an acre. And then on the east side, you'd be looking at around 2. So in total, you'd be looking approximately around 14 dwelling units an acre, and per the Leawood Development Ordinance for a mixed-use development, you're actually allowed a maximum of 15 dwelling units per acre.
So the MXD zoning permits 15 units per acre.
That's correct.
And if this was, this may be a more difficult question to answer, but if this was a combination of multifamily and single-family zoning in that space, can you give me a ballpark idea of what the zoning or what the density requirements would be?
Yeah, so with the RP4 district, I believe that's 6,000 square feet per resident.
4,000.
It's 4,000 square feet per residential unit. And then
It's 10.89.
And so it gets really difficult because a lot of these buildings, so under the Leawood Development Ordinance, under an RP4 zoning district, which is our highest density zoning district, you're actually only allowed 12 units in a combined building. And a lot of these buildings have way more than 12 units in a single building. And so if you were to go through an RP4 zoning, a lot of this plan would actually change from what you see on the plan today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Are there other questions for Mr. Sanchez? Commissioner Coleman.
Mr. Sanchez, question for you. The single-family homes were part of a previous revision. Do you have the overlay for that we can see?
Yes.
Of what originally they looked like? I think it was the first one.
Yeah. So as you can see here, and this was the first rendition that the Planning Commission ever saw. And so there was a double row of single-family homes here, and it was between Pawnee and High Drive. Kind of how it's shown now, except there's only a single row.
Okay, and in terms of the houses themselves, the lots, how many lots were on that northern border?
all along the north. Around 26,
26 were just on the north side there?
26, 27, yeah, something like
Okay.
that.
So it was 26, now it's 29.
Yep.
What's the difference in the lots or the square footage between this first initial proposal and the latest revision?
So the lots did get a little bit smaller with this rendition, however, they are, I believe that they're all more than 12,000 square feet. And so that would meet even the regulations of a RP3 zoning district.
Okay. So you have the first one, just for to kind of refresh my memory, can you go from the first to the second to the third to the fourth for me, please?
Sure, definitely. So this was the first rendition, so you really, you had this straight line of double rows of single family. There was a secondary part here along 135th Street, which had 12 and 14 unit apartment complexes. Then on the east side of High Drive, there were larger complexes here. And then we also had that commercial space along State Line Road.
Ricky, this is Commissioner Hoyt. Before you go on, how many total dwelling units were in that first plan?
So on that first plan, we had 718 dwelling units.
Okay. Thank you.
So on this second rendition, the big change was a curve right here where the single family was. And then this changed quite a bit. The design's interior to the site really changed. And here we started seeing some covered parking spaces. And then again, you see the commercial along State Line Road. And that one had 716 dwelling units. So then, definitely from the second to the third one was the biggest change, and so that's when the applicant then started integrating the gridded streets, really started integrating parts of the 135th Street Community Plan. And so that's when we started getting the duplexes along 135th Street, or 133rd Street with the east-west connections. And so you'll see the larger apartment buildings, and then, again, the 12 to 14 unit buildings with the integration of townhouses in between. And then, again, the commercial part of the development along State Line Road. And this one had 944 dwelling units.
And then this is, the current one's the fourth
And
one?
then the current one.
And how many dwelling units for that as well?
900 and, should be 35.
935,
Yep.
okay. All right, so let me just get this straight. We go from 718, 716, 944, 935.
Yeah, and so the real big jump came from the
Second and
second to
third.
third one, where they really changed the design of the application.
Okay. Another question on one of the overlays. If you could put up 714, please. My question on this one is, can you point out to me the retail office part of this? I could only find two right towards the Greenway.
Sure. So, Building A and Building F actually have integrated retail office
okay.
space. So right here and right here. And then you are correct. So as you start getting to that Greenway, you get a retail building here, and then retail as the capstones to those buildings.
And that's it for that?
Correct.
For the west side, okay. And then if you could go to C16. The residential, why don't we do the opposite on this one? Where's the
Okay.
residential on this one?
So buildings AF and AB are live-work units, and so they have, I believe, 20 units in each building. And then you have the large assisted living facility in building AD.
Okay.
And then you also have townhome units right here.
And the live work, can you just explain the live work? Are those considered apartments or?
Yeah, the applicant will probably be able to explain what actually functions within the live-work units, but I believe that they're just kind of offices on one floor and then apartments and then,
Above them?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Hoyt.
Yeah. So in looking at the number of dwelling units, and by a very rough calculation, the number of dwelling units has gone up by roughly 34, 35% from the first version of this to the last version of this. What is the staff's position on the desirability of having 935 dwelling units versus 718 dwelling units? And how does that, is there any sort of formula on this sort of housing that would convert that into number of people that would be added to the census within that area?
Sure, and so I think we've heard from a number of the neighbors that they believe that the project is too dense. And I mean, unfortunately, what we have to go through is the Leawood Development Ordinance, and as long as you meet the requirements of below 15 dwelling units per acre, that's our regulation that we have in the city of Leawood for mixed-use developments. And so we have heard from the neighbors, however, the applicant is meeting that standard that the city has set. As far as figuring out the number of people, I believe that you can go to the census and find the average number of people per home or per residential unit. I believe it's, I don't know, 2.5 for Leawood, somewhere around there. And so if you multiply the number of units by 2.5, you'll roughly find the total number of people that could live in this development.
Okay, and this may not be a number that you have access to, but this is a 116 acre development. Do we have any other development of roughly the same size that would be of this density in the city of Leawood?
We don't have anything as far as this size of development. This is by far the largest. However, we do have a number of developments that are around this density.
Right, I guess I'm just thinking about, you know, the impact on the area around this development, because you can have an equal density. You can have 15 people per acre on a 1 acre, you know, or 2 acre, or even 10 acre development, and it wouldn't have a big impact on the surrounding community in terms of the profile of the neighborhoods and so forth. But if we have 116 acres with this degree of density, you know, that is actually a different phenomenon, I think.
And so probably the closest that we have to, as far as the amount of acreage, is Parkway Plaza, which is about 60 acres. Park Place is just under 30 acres. Mission Farms is just under 30 acres as well. Those are probably the larger ones.
Yeah, and Parkway Place was how many acres, did you say?
Parkway Plaza is 60 acres.
Okay, so this is basically twice the number of acres as the biggest development so far.
Correct.
Okay.
Mark, just to clarify, which development, because sometimes I get Park Place and Parkway Place.
Yeah, there's a lot of this. Yeah, it does get confusing. Parkway Plaza is actually the one that has it's down on 133rd Street and Briar. It has the Starbucks that's located down there. The Country Club Bank is located there. They kind of have a main center. It's where the Weber Carpet is being constructed right now.
And that's the one that's 60 acres.
And that's the one that's 60 acres, correct.
In contrast, Park Place,
And Park Place is just under 30 acres.
thank you.
But Parkway Plaza, just to clarify, would not have this, doesn't in fact have this amount of density. correct?
No, Parkway Plaza does not have this density. It's
Right.
lower.
Yeah. And would that be true of the next largest development, also Park Place?
Park Place, I actually believe, is pretty close to this density. And I believe that Mission Farms is pretty close to this density as well, but I'd have to double check. But I think it's in the
Okay.
ballpark.
Okay, thank you.
And just follow up on the point on 15 dwelling units per acre. What section of the LDO is that found in?
Oh, I believe it's 16-2-6.4. And that's the bulk regulations for mixed-use developments.
Thanks. Other questions? Commissioner Block?
How long has this area been designated as MDX in the comprehensive plan?
Oh, I believe it's been like that for at least 20 years. No.
I believe it's probably been at least 10 years that it's been that way, and probably a little bit longer than that.
And just to remind me, on the comprehensive plan, that's looked at every year by this body as well as the governing body, or how does it?
It's looked at, correct, by this body as well as the governing body. And prior to that, there was portions of this that was shown on the comprehensive plan as far as residential, but I believe that the only portion that was located on the east side of Market Square, and then most of the, well, actually, I take that back, that was zoning. I think most of the rest of it was commercial, and we've had a number of commercial projects that had come in probably around 2008, a little bit before 2008. We had a number of commercial developments, and that's really when we saw the most activity with Parkway Plaza, Bellagio, Cornerstone, all those developments along there. And there was a couple that happened that were denied, and there was a couple of them that were actually just never built.
So then about that time is when it was switched to MDX instead of commercial? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's okay.
Specifically.
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, any questions for staff?
I'm sorry, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions then for Mr. Sanchez? If not, we'll move on to invite Mr. Odo to come forward and tell us more about the changes. Good evening, Mr. Odo. Welcome to the Planning Commission again.
Welcome back. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all hearing me out again.
Good to see you. I trust that you heard my introduction,
I
that
did.
it's my plan to have the entirety of your presentation wrapped up by 7:45, if at all possible, and to go to the public hearing at that point. in
That's our
time.
goal too. We'd like to see the same thing. Before I get going on my part, I'd really like to introduce Bob Renier and Fred Logan to speak first, if you don't mind. I think Bob Renier, Mr. Renier's going to speak first for you all.
It's your time to use as you see fit. Good evening, Mr. Renier. Welcome back. It's nice to see you in person.
Good to see you in person. Thank you, Chairman Elkins and Commission. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. I also want to extend my appreciation to the staff of planning staff of the city for their work over the many months on this project. We've been working on this project for over 2 years, and we're grateful for their assistance in helping us get to where we're at today, and for this Commission's careful consideration of this project. You know, the history of this piece of ground, my family has a long history with this property, almost 50 years, not over 50 years, but close to 50 years. And it's been extremely difficult to develop. I mean, there has been commercial zoning and the mixed-use zoning for almost that entire time period, that we've owned the property, and it's been very, very difficult to get something. There have been a number of projects that have been proposed, but none have ever gotten to the point where they could be approved. We believe that this proposed development is a very special opportunity for the city. That we have all, in my workings with Mr. Odo, I've been very impressed by the commitment that he's made to this project and his willingness to continue to modify the project to meet the needs of the city and the neighbors. He's also demonstrated great respect for the city and its residents. The Cameron Court plan has been through many iterations, and his staff has worked tirelessly with the staff of the city to try to get to this point. This is the city's opportunity to foster a high-quality development over a very large area. This is the first proposal to the city that takes a comprehensive approach to the entire development parcel. And I want to emphasize that, every other transaction that has been considered by the city to this point in time has always been for a small portion of it. I mean, it's, for 40 acres here or 20 acres here. And what we've got here is an approach that takes a comprehensive plan in developing the entire site. And the other thing is that you go back and look at the Odo development. I mean, he's an open book. The Odo has a number of developments in the greater metropolitan area, and all of them are extremely high quality. He gets awards all the time for the quality of the development and for the designs that he has within his development. So in conclusion, I'd like to recommend would like for you to recommend to the City Council to approve this project. And now I will introduce my counsel, Fred Logan, for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Rainier. Welcome, Mr. Logan. It's good to see you again as well.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Fred Logan and Watson, Prairie Village, and I am counsel to Mr. Rainier on this project, and I want to begin by joining with him in expressing admiration for the Odo development team. The commitment they have demonstrated through the various iterations of these plans is the best possible indicator of how they will perform in the coming years. We view this, and this has a legal ramification, we view this as a once in every 20 years opportunity for the city. This land has remained vacant since the mid-1970s with essentially similar zoning. It was a commercial zoning and then mixed zoning for 20 years. This is an extraordinary opportunity for the city to be able to work with a quality developer with a proven track record of success in high-quality developments throughout the area. That's the opportunity that you will have with the Odo team. We also think it's extremely important to note the various iterations of this plan. Mr. Odo has really stayed in the game on this and has, at considerable expense, fostered a number of different plans. And here's the important result, the recommendation of your professional staff. Staff recommends approval of the application as the project meets the requirements of the Leawood Development Ordinance and now incorporates more elements of the comprehensive plan and 135th Street Community Plan for mixed-use development. It's extremely important that that recommendation has been made. That puts us in a different position when I stood before you the last time, when staff recommendation was in the negative. Staff recommends this plan. This is a historic opportunity for the city to have one developer that it can work with over a very substantial piece of ground. It meets all the requirements of the Leawood Development Ordinance and is consistent with all of the policy guidelines in the 135th Street Community Plan. I would just simply close by noting that you have, and the city has, proof of Mr. Odo's demonstrated commitment to the city. He's worked with his team over many months on various iterations of these plans at great expense, and he has demonstrated a commitment to the city. And we urge you to recommend to the City Council that it approve this project. And I thank members of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Logan.
Chairman Elkin, before I go any further, I'd also like to have my attorney come up and speak on behalf of me, Kurt Holland, talk about just a couple of things real quickly.
Absolutely.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Curtis Holland with the Polson Lilly Firm, representing the Odo Development Team, and appreciate you hearing our application again tonight. I know it's been many meetings. I think you mentioned this is our 6th meeting tonight on this. I'm just really briefly going to discuss the stipulations. Wanted to get those out of the way before we made our presentation and sort of follow the same order that we did the last time. I'm happy to say that we don't have as many objections to the stipulations as we had last time, and I really only want to focus your attention on two of the stipulations. First, if we could look at stipulation 11D, and this relates to the request or stipulation to widen 135th Street as part of our project. I know it's not required until the eastern half or the commercial area is developed, and that's needed. And I know that the traffic impact study also mentioned that it would be needed by that time, but I wanted to suggest to you that, as it relates to the 135th Street community or corridor impact fee, there is a interrelation between those two items in our opinion. One is the city is requiring that, and it's per ordinance, that we make this payment to the city because we are within the 135th Street corridor. And so we're not necessarily objecting to the making of that payment. It is by code. But we are wanting to visit a little bit about the requirement to widen 135th Street, because that's an extra requirement. It's not necessarily a code requirement, but it is something that staff is recommending that be done. Public Works staff is recommending that it be done. And our only request is that, we believe we ought to be given a credit for the cost of the widening of the road against the 135th Street corridor impact fee to make it fair. In most communities, you either make improvements or you pay a fee, and the city makes those improvements. And here, we're having to do both. And that's very unusual. And we don't necessarily believe it's all fair, and don't necessarily believe that all of the traffic that is going to travel up and down 135th Street can be, pinpointed onto this particular development. We're not saying that we're not going to contribute to any of that traffic, but we're certainly saying that we shouldn't have to pay for 100% of the road improvement while also paying this pretty steep corridor impact fee. So that's one request we're asking you to consider. And then the other stipulation I'd like you to turn your attention to is number 37. This is one that'll be familiar to the chairman and all of you, and this had to do with the joint and several liability requirement with respect to maintenance of the common areas. And last time we went over what joint and several meant, and for our point, we're not opposed to having joint liability among the property owners for those maintenance improvements. What we are objecting to is the term several, making each of those owners joint and severally liable. And again, the point to that is that the city could, if they wanted to, go after any one individual unit owner to make all of those improvements. We don't think that's a good way to, ensure that the maintenance is done. I think that we'll have a pretty solid declaration with obligations spelled out in it, and indication that all the property owners have some joint responsibility and obligation for the maintenance, but we just do not, we object to the term several for the very reason I've mentioned. We don't think it's fair to put or allow for the city to go after one particular or one individual unit owner or property owner. Let's go after the one with the deepest pockets kind of thing. And I know we talked about that extensively last time, so that's again our one objection to that stipulation. And we're in agreement with all the other changes or all the other stipulations. So unless you have any questions, I would defer to Mr. Odo.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Mr. Odo, would you prefer that we ask questions of Mr. Holland now or at the conclusion of your presentation? Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Holland on either of the stipulations that he's concerned about? Commissioner Block.
On that first one with 11D, I guess I can you remind me where the other part of that is, that you're wanting to?
Show, there's it falls back under the Public Works recommendation.
That's what
So
I
you have to go to the other set of stipulations that there's a requirement or request, and it is, let me get my glasses back out. So if you go under, I believe it's, I'm not immediately finding it. I don't know if staff can help me with where that is located.
Would that be item 2B?
D6, maybe?
I believe.
Yes, that's it, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. That's all I had.
So stipulation D2, 2D, Romanet 6 is where that's found.
On that 2D6, this is Commissioner Hoyt. There's this sort of cryptic parenthetical, this work is anticipated to be performed by others. What does that mean?
I think that's related to, Ms. Commissioner, I believe that's related to the widening of the 135th Street on the south side of the road. We're responsible, I believe, for the widening to a third lane on the north side of 135th Street. And I think that's specifically referenced to the what is called the Lashbrook project, which is immediately to the south.
But you're saying that 2D6 indicates your responsibility.
Well, 6, the first part of it does. The westbound lane shall be widened to 3 lanes from State Line to Pawnee.
Okay. So really, the second sentence there doesn't relate to you at all, is what you're saying.
Correct. We don't like that sentence, but the Public Works folks left it in there. And but they did clarify it to make sure, they added the parenthetical to be performed by others, so, to make that clear.
Thanks.
Anything else, Commissioner Block?
No, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Holland with respect to either of the stipulations that he's expressed concern about?
Mr. Commissioner?
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Holland. With respect to the impact fees you're referring to in 11D, unfortunately, there's not a summary in this packet which indicates a summary of what the impact fees are for this whole project. But at the last meeting before I believe it was July 13th, as I recall, based upon the data that was provided by the in the packet, it appeared to me that the total impact fees by the type of fee, there's a park impact fee, art impact fee, which is not me, it's artwork, street impact fee, 135th quarter fee. The total comes to about $2.2 million. Now, with what you're talking about changing regarding 11D, how approximately does that affect the total impact phase?
Well, so hearing an echo, but what I'm talking specifically about is the additional cost of the widening will add another $1 million+ to the couple of $1 million that you just referenced. So it's really a $3 million to $4 million hit to pay all these impact fees and also require the widening of 135th Street. So it's an additional cost to those impact fees. And what we're indicating is that if we're going to have to pay a 135th Street corridor impact fee, and along with all these other fees, we need to, or should be given credit for the cost that we are incurring to widen 135th Street.
So you're saying that widening 135th Street for the west side only is $1 million?
Probably more.
No, if I can address this. I believe our engineer told us to be closer to 1.8 for 1 mile long third lane and the decel lanes.
On just the west side?
Just the west side. So we're just asking that we get a credit towards whatever we spend on improvements of 135th Street, that we get a credit towards, which I think is going to exceed what you're asking for in the fees on 135th Street. So we don't get double hit for what I see as one service. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just so I'm clear about one thing. Now, again, prior to the July 13th meeting, I went through and took all of the data from the estimated impact fees and banged them up against the numbers in the documents. Now, since that time, the number of units have been reduced, but according to my estimates, which I did share with Mr. Klein as well as Chairman Elkins, at that time, the total impact fees that I estimated was approximately $2.277 million. Now, you're indicating this will be increase the impact fees by an additional $1 million?
I guess to clarify, I'm not saying it'll increase the impact fees. It's an increase to the cost of the project. So those fees that you just mentioned, and I'm not going to dispute what the accuracy of it, I don't doubt that it's at least that much. But what I'm trying to say is that you need to factor in this additional $1.8 million or so that we would have to incur by constructing this extra third lane on 135th Street. So I think it's fair to say you can add that cost to those other impact fees that you're mentioning as a cost to do business really in the city of Leawood here. And we're not necessarily saying we shouldn't have some contribution to 135th Street in ways, because we are going to add some traffic to that area, but I'm not sure it's fair to require the developer to pay both the full impact fee as well as then require them to actually put in the road. There's, at least I think it's arguable that the payment of the corridor fee, impact fee, was intended to, in fact, pay for corridor improvements like 135th Street. So we do see that as a bit of a double dip.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Other questions for Mr. Holland? Thank you, Mr. Holland. We appreciate your comments. Mr. Odo.
Thank you very much. And just to clarify, we're more than willing to pay the greater of the two fees, either the improvements we do on 135th Street or the impact fees. Whichever one's greater, I'm more than willing to pay for. But I believe our improvements are going to be greater than what the impact fee is. That's why I was asking for credit towards that. I will try to keep to your 7:45 deadline, and I do not see a problem with that.
I'm grateful.
Because I would like to get through this even more so than you all would. Guys, I can't thank you enough once again to hear this out. We have made some changes. We have made some improvements, and we have worked diligently with staff. And I'm going to get into some of those details a little bit later. But this site, being a mile long, sitting empty for as long as it has been, it's ready to be developed with the right plan. We do have mixed use on both east and west side, but remember in the court, in the plan, in your own guidelines, it says in there, and I'm not going to say it right, but paraphrasing, put the retail and commercial where needed. Not just a percentage someplace, but where it's called for and needed. And I can't stress that enough. And that's what we feel like we've done. And I will say it again, I promise you, as we get into this and I come before final, and I get marketing on these things, if I see that I can do more retail and more office, I'm happy to do so. Because as we've stated before, retail is definitely a lot more profitable than apartments, so I'd rather do retail. But if it's empty, it serves us no purpose just to build and have it sit empty for a while. We've seen that happen, so I don't want to do that. So anyway, before I get going on anything, I would like to replay the revised video of Cameron's Court with the single-family homes in it and some of the other improvements that we've got. If you can indulge me for a couple of minutes, I'd really appreciate it. So is Ross, are you ready? Can I just play? Hit play? Is the music playing for?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I don't think there's video, so I might be talking about what's going on here then, if that's the case. I'm going to back it up. Sorry. I thought the sound was going to be on. So, as you can see, we've got a lot of green spaces. We've got luxury apartments. We've got single family across 133rd. Chadwick Park is going to be amazing. We'll have single family and twin villas as a buffer between the north and the south. We've got the mansion style homes, which are pretty much 12-unit buildings. We've got brownstone units that'll be available for sale. We've got retail and office buildings on the west side. These are our mid-rise over here you can see the office and retail across the front along Pawnee. You're driving down Pawnee, and we're going to turn left into 134th Street. We're going to have our parking garages you can't see from 135th or from 133rd. We do hide them well, camouflage them, and then we make amazing amenity decks for our residents to use. They're on the right. You can see some on the right, the garages, how they work. And then on top, next to the ponds, you can start to see how we have the private areas for the residents that have bocce ball, fire pits, and other things. We hope to have juice bars there, restaurants available for everybody. This is coming into Chadwick Park. You've got brownstones on both north and east and west side. It turns into a one-way street. You got your kiosk there. You got restaurants at the end of each of the two buildings of the brownstones. You can see how the brownstones look. And Chadwick Park is over 90 feet wide and about 300 and 400, it's like 400 feet long. So we'll be able to have a lot of things, car shows, food trucks, theater in the park, jazz bands, movie nights, very family oriented. Of course, we have retail shops on both east and west side. Anyway, we'll look at what it could look like. The art fairs will be popular for everybody to enjoy throughout Leawood. It's not just for our residents. As you get to the end of Chadwick Park, you can turn left or right. Here we turn right, and you can see some of our single families as we'd be going down. What some of our single families will look like. This is coming into 134th Street, heading west, just off the state line. You can see the Main Street feel on both left and right side of it. And you can see how the Main Street just keeps on going. We'll have dinners and shops over here, dining facilities and shops. We'll have work lift places. As you go down Kenneth Loop towards 135th Street, this is kind of what it looks like. We'll have retail first floor, offices on second floor. This will be Leawood's premier community. Thank you for looking at our video. I would think that this is something that everybody would want to have. It will be a community for all of Leawood to enjoy. Now I'm going to try something really difficult. I'm going to try to switch from video to my stick here for my presentation. All right. Start from the beginning. Okay. So, once again, thank you very much for reviewing this project again. Sorry if I'm a little bit nervous. This is a big deal for me, for anybody. This is going to be the second largest development in all of Leawood, next to Town Center. And it will bring a lot of people, shops, and office space to the community. But you really need to bring it in the right order. Retail and office won't come unless you've got the residential component there first, and that's what we plan on doing. I think you guys know the area. I am going to work the mouse the best I can. State Line, 135th Street, Pawnee, and then 133rd, bifurcated by the church. The southern part of that church area is all flood zone. I think you guys are aware of this. This has been zoned since 1975 as office, commercial, or... What now?
Are they seeing the screen now?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
Actually.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Ross, could we?
Oh, there we go. Okay. So, anyway, State Line, 135th Street, Pawnee, 133rd. You guys know the area. It is a 1 mile long community. It was originally designed to be 4 or 5 different communities. No one envisioned it to be one big one. And it doesn't matter if the math is 4 or 5 big ones, or 4 or 5 small ones, or one big one, as long as we don't exceed the allowable density. And we haven't done that. This corridor has always been considered a dense corridor. It was originally designed to be something more like College Boulevard, high, tall buildings along there. 6 to 9 story buildings was originally envisioned. So it's always been envisioned to be a very dense, heavy use. We don't have anywhere near that type of density here. So we feel like it's a much better plan than what people were expecting when they bought into homes to the north. It has always been a high density corridor. And we feel like we're going to bring something with less density, but still high impact to the value of Leawood. Thank you. We've got, it came up before, how many units are allowed? If you can see here, the allowable units are 1742 on this site. And we have 935 units. My math came to 8.05. You guys were at 8.4, close enough that it's still about 47%, 45-47% less density than allowed. And when I came in to work with staff before, from the first, second revisions that were pretty close to the major changes that we came over, they told us that, you know, what you're going to have to do, or we recommend, nothing you have to do, but what we recommend you do is, one, you definitely need to add more retail, because we heard that, more residential communities on the east side. So we've added over almost, well, we got the senior living plus about 100 units over there. In addition, we had to be able to put in a large park like we had to do a few things to increase the density so that we could be able to do this. But when you're running 47% of density, that should be rewarded. It doesn't really matter if it's more or less than what we had before. It's still about half of what's allowed by code. When we came in to start talking to them, the first thing they said is, don't worry about anything about how many. As long as you're not close to the 15 and you're far below that, you don't have to worry about adding a few more units. We just wanted to meet the corridor plan. It needed to have the grid streets. It needed to have the Main Street feel, and we had a litany of other things that we had to meet. As long as it meets that, then don't worry about anything else. And that's what we tried doing, but still keeping in mind, keep the density as low as possible. So now we've got a very diverse types of housing and very affordable housing, from single-family, twin villas, mansion-style homes. Yes, we added the 4-story buildings here that are called out for and wanted in the 135th Street plan. So what we did was take your 135th Street plan and embraced it, and with super low density. And the super low density allowed us to have a lot of green space that no one was expecting us to have. And I'm going to get into some of that later. So just so you know how low density, office space has to be a minimum of 285,000. That's the minimum allowed by your LDO. We have the minimum amount. No need putting in more if it's not needed. We have to have a minimum of 5% retail. We have 6.9. Yes, we could have 400,000 square feet of retail and still have all the apartments. We could have 600,000 square feet of office and still have all the apartments and still be within code. We don't have that. So our density could not be lower. The residential community, we're showing, like I said, our math, 8.05. If I'm wrong, by the way, I'm not trying to lie to anybody. It's not off by a lot. It's still within, it's 807 units below the allowable density. That number we agree on. Anyway, keep on going here. So the major changes that we've added. Obviously, the most important is we've added 29 single-family homes across 133rd. We still kept the twin villas. We need a diversity of homes here. We need a diversity of price points for the different homes. And I'll get into more of that later. We moved our senior living over here 72 feet to the east. When we did that, we created 4.5 additional acres of trees, of natural habitat area, which I think is phenomenal. We now have over 17.4 acres of parks and natural space, not just green space. We've got almost, I think it's 39.5 acres of green space. Is that right? Something like that. This is just parks and wooded areas that everybody will be able to enjoy. Far larger than any other, than Geezer Park down the street. And this will be for everybody to enjoy. Our green space is 35% of the 116 acres, above requirements of the LDO. We removed the deferred parking and we put in we just eliminated all the bit of future parking and we just put in, okay, we'll need parking here, here, and here. We now meet the required parking, minimum and maximum. We're in between that range. The sidewalks, we meet the 135th Street corridor plan now and the LDO with the fire code, so we don't have our setbacks too far. That was our issues we had before. We now meet that. We're also in agreement with the Main Street community. As I said before, we've got a Main Street feel coming off on 34th Street and then again in Chadwick. That was the thing that they asked us to do, and we put those in, along with another type of housing that wasn't there before. So these are the things that added a little bit more units, and these brownstones are all for sale. The condos over the office space that we have over on the east side, those will be for sale. We've got a lot of different products that will be for sale. The other is Kenneth Loop. As staff said before, originally they had wanted this to be a public street. We're all in agreement that we don't need a public street. That was one of the requests. If you remember originally from all the neighbors to the north, they wanted the streets offset so they didn't line up with High Drive and other streets. These people to the north here didn't want Kenneth to go straight through. The traffic didn't deem it. Public Works agreed, so now we can make it a private street. Once it became a private street in a loop, we had to move it 25 feet to the east. That's all it did, was move 25 feet from the property line over to the east. Now you can see how it lines up with the detention pond to the north. And the neighbors there are worried that, well, lights might shine into the neighborhood. And even though the ground goes uphill to the north, I'm still volunteering now. Upon approval with city council, I'd be happy to donate money or put in the trees, shrubs, additional screening there for their protection, and we get it started now so we can start getting additional growth for when we have development over there. It'll be well protected. So I'm trying to do something like that. The other change we made, since you all know, Quick Trip is going across the street. We had a C-store here on the corner, and Quick Trip is going in across the street. No need having two Quick Trips across the street from each other, so we downgraded the usage to a restaurant. Most likely it'll be a quick serve, which means drive-through. And per the traffic report that you've already seen, I believe it says in there that this will reduce traffic between 17 and 25%. That's why and it should be, that's one of the things that they said before. They didn't want the C-store, so we're doing that. The other thing that's been asked is the natural habitat, as you can see here, stops about halfway down to the restaurant. We are going to continue the forestation all the way down as far as we can, not to block views, but so that we continue to block as much view from Greenbrier on across, what is the subdivision here to the north? What is it? Enclave, I'm sorry, from Enclave. Even though most of the view is blocked by the pub and the retail center that's already there, we're still going to do what we can to add additional protection to block the view over here. So we're trying to do what we can to be good neighbors. And I do want to stress, along 133rd, it's been asked several times, how are we going to screen our single family from their single family? We'll probably do the exact same plantings that, I mean, I have to put a couple thousand trees here, so I'm happy to do that, and we will block, and I'd rather it be along 133rd as much as possible. We'll also do a lot along 135th Street. So we're going to do the best we can to screen both north and south sides of the community. Okay, so as I stated before, Cameron's Court is designed to be a cohesive, walkable, bikeable community. We've got dedicated bike trails and a lot of natural habitats that we saved. You can see in the bright red the bike trail that goes all the way around, loops all the way around the church. That'll be a nice feature for all of Leawood to enjoy. We also have lots of, all the dark green that you see are natural habitats or parks for all. That's not all the green space we have. You can see that on the normal plan. These are just parks and heavily wooded areas or open space that we can use for all of Leawood to enjoy. Of course, we now meet the street network. That was one of the issues we had before. So we have all types of streets, destination streets, activity streets, neighborhood streets. We have the widths that are necessary for setbacks. We have the Main Street corridor fill that was requested off 134th Street, and once again with Chadwick. And I can't stress enough how much we worked with staff to come up with these ideas. They would suggest, well, this is what we recommend. These are some pictures. This is what it did. So we tried to incorporate them into our plan. This is one of the reasons why they now say we meet the 135th Street corridor plan and why we meet LDO and why it should be approved. And I agree with them. I am going to go over the transect and transitioning because this seems to be one of the bones of contention some people have had. You guys know how the corridor plan calls out for T4, T5, and T6 zoning or planning. T3 is the single families to the north. T4 is supposed to be a buffer between the single families to the north and the apartments that we have in T5. And then T6 is supposed to be the high density area. Now, technically, everything we have in our whole community falls in within the T5 allowable designation. But we did push all of our heavy retail along State Line and down 135th Street in this L over here, put the highest density in the T6 region of the east side of the community. We have light density retail here and light on these as a percentage. But they still have, stress again, retail office from east to west. And I feel that our transitioning between to have single-family, and we do need twin villas here as a price point for the development. We can't have it all at $800,000 homes. Now, in other communities that you've approved for MXD, I think we transition much better than anybody else approved in Leawood. Just across the street here, you've got Park Place. You've got 6-story buildings right across the street from single family. So our single family and twin villas ought to be more than adequate as a buffer if they can have 6-story across the street. Over at Mission Farms, you've got 4-story buildings separated by a parking lot to multi-million-dollar homes. Once again, I feel like our zoning, our transitioning from single family to apartments is far better than any other transitioning you've approved in Leawood. Here's a picture of your transitioning plan that you had. You can see the T3, the single family over here. T4 is what's up against the 133rd Street. Here's a picture of what and all your discussion in your 135th Street corridor plan says is 2- and 3-story apartments. We're at single family and twin villas. I think we're far superior than was ever envisioned to be for transition. And I hope it's appreciated by our neighbors. We were trying to be very respectful of that. Once again, Chadwick Park, our centerpiece. Because of our super low density, we're able to have a very large park right in the center of Leawood that we're going to be able to have all sorts of cultural events, from farmers markets, food trucks, theater in the park, art festivals, music in the park. Love to have jazz there. Car shows and cultural events. Now, I think that one of the things that came up is, well, where's all the parking going to be? We have enough street parking that we can house hundreds of cars here for events if they're really that popular. And I also really want to stress these are family-oriented events that we expect to close down around 10-ish. We will meet all ordinances so we don't offend anybody with noise. They're probably going to be mostly Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays, how we see them to happen. Maybe Sundays for the farmers market and stuff like that. But I truly believe this is a community for all of Leawood. Excuse me here. So, housing types. I'm going to read a quick excerpt from your 135th Street plan. Given the aging and relatively affluent population presented in Johnson County, the 135th Street area is a likely candidate for additional residential development, including townhomes and apartments to serve the empty nester demographic, which is who our number one demographic is. The area, given its appeal, could attract empty nester buyers from throughout Johnson County and beyond the Kansas City metropolitan area. Could not agree more with that statement. Currently, the demand exists for multifamily homes geared towards young professionals. Once again, I agree with that. Therefore, the most likely product to move forward in the studied area, which is the 135th Street corridor, this is out of your book, is most likely product types to move forward in the study area include row homes, townhomes, villa homes, and apartments. So we are following your guideline to the T of what's expected. There's also excerpts in there that state that the office and retail needs have already been met for the most part in surrounding things. So there's no need for a lot of additional retail in addition to all the apartments. So our demographic is usually one half our demographic at Bill Milano, very similar product, 10 to 12 units per building, same type that we're talking about. Half the people there are over 50. 1/3 of them are over 65, and now I'm going to start mixing some different things in here. A lot of that, about half of the people over 50 have homes or apartments down south, Florida, Texas, Arizona, and they have a really nice home here, apartment home here, and they want to have a place where they can go back and forth. I love these type of residents. You've got 1/3 of the people between 35 and 55 that are divorcees who want to be within 2 miles of their family, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to have to live far away from my family if I was divorced and couldn't live, but I would still want to be by my friends and my family. And these are the people who live here. The smallest demographic, about 15 to 20%, are the young professionals who want to see what's like living in Leawood. They want to see, they like the neighborhood, they like the schools, and they don't have kids, and they want to see what it's like before they buy a house. And these people usually buy something within 3 to 4 miles. We lose the most amount of people out of our apartments to people buying homes within 3 miles, 4 miles of Villa Milano. And I don't know why you wouldn't want those type of residents in Leawood. I'm going to read a short email that I received that is so typical of our demographic, and it reverberates exactly what Commissioner Peterson said at the last meeting we had as to what's going on. My husband and I recently moved to Villa Milano, our apartment community is just across the street from Cameron's Court. Moved to Villa Milano after being homeowners our entire lives. We sold our homes in Prairie Village and started looking for a desirable place to live comparable to what we have been used to. After looking at many properties and not being happy with what we found, we looked at Villa Milano and Leawood. We immediately felt like we could call this community our home. The property itself is beautiful. To look at it and maintain it, it's beautiful to look at and maintain to the highest of standards. Our apartment feels so cozy and comfortable. It really does not feel like an apartment living. We feel like we have our own home again, just smaller space. The amenities are amazing also. The option of having a luxury place to lease was exactly what we were looking for. These are the people we want to bring to Cameron's Court, to our high-end community. So I'm going to go into here some of the housing types that we have. Our community has several different types. I believe we've got 9 different types of housing. We've got single family, twin villas, mansion-style homes, brownstones, luxury apartment homes with penthouses. I'm going to get into those in a little bit. Townhomes, work-live, senior living. We have a variety of homes, and a lot of them will be for sale. Single family, condos, twin villas, brownstones. And we have the for sale product not all concentrated in one area, but scattered throughout. So we really immerse and mix the people. Not that there's anything different about any of them, but we have a diversity of different living styles all in this community. And at the heart of it is going to be Cameron's Court, where they can meet for coffee, for little restaurants. I think that's going to be really neat to have some neat local restaurants right there. This is our single family. This is one of our larger ones. It's going to be 3,200 to 3,800 square feet, probably closer to 3,200 to 3,600 square feet. We expect it to be at least $800,000, 3-car, and you can see up here in the top where the single families are. It's in the blue. Here's another version of a 2-car garage. It'll be more like, it'll be a little bit smaller. It'll be more 2,800 to 3,200, selling a little bit less. And then another version of our 3-bedroom. I'm going to try going through this fairly quickly. Of course, we've got our twin villas. There'll be more the 1,800 to 2,400 square feet per side, ranging around the 650 range. Of course, we've got the twin villas. These are 8 to 14 units per building. If we needed to, we could meet the 12-unit code, but that's not really asked for. But these are just like the apartments we have at Villa Milano that these are the ones that people feel like are homes, because you pull into your garage and you walk right into your kitchen or into your private entry and you go up or down to your apartment home. And they don't have a public hallway. They don't have the public areas that a lot of apartments have. This is why they call them homes. And most people think this is all for product for sale because it's so well maintained and like condos. But these are high-end apartment homes. Another view of the same, of a different type of mansion home that we have here as well. These are the brownstones. You can see the different textures, the different colors. Once again, we've got a lot of different variations of colors and textures, but a lot of similarities being carried through. Now, Henry could probably say it better than I can, but when you got a 1-mile-long community, to make it feel like a sense of place and have similarities carried through, it's really hard. But we're trying to do this with having little communities within communities that have a little bit of differences, but still very blended product, blended, products, colors. But within that, we got several different colors of stucco, several different types of stone, several different colors of brick. I also want to stress up here, these brownstones, they'll have balconies out here and patios out front. Really cool for people to have and own and watch what happens in the Chadwick Park. And you can see, I'm sorry, I'm going to show you where they are. You've got 2 of them here, you've got 2, and you got 4 here around Chadwick Park. And you actually have 2 more over here in the main street on the east side. So once again, carrying elements throughout the entire community. These are our high-end mid-rise apartments. They're L-shaped, and this is a view from 135th Street over here. This would be Pawn E, and you can see how it looks with the retail and commercial on the first floor. We feel like we can bring a nice restaurant here, something similar to a Rye, we're hoping here. They'll have outside seating. I think it'd be a really nice restaurant for everybody to enjoy. Another look at it with the patio and the fireplace. This is one of the coolest concepts, I think, the amenity court for these. We have them L-shaped. And this way, from 135th Street, you don't see the parking garage. We camouflage it the best you can camouflage a parking garage. And then we put a courtyard deck on top of it. Now, I was at a boutique hotel in California, and I saw this. I go, this is exactly what I want to do for my community in Leawood. So we've taken this and put it in here from a hotel to an apartment. I think it's cool as can be. We've got fire pits on it. We've got gazebos, bocce ball. We've got all sorts of meeting places for our residents. They are going to love this. And then on the corners, I'm going to go back a second here. I'm sorry, guys. On our corners of these units here in the L shape, at the ends of the L shapes, we're going to have penthouses. These penthouses are going to be about 22 to 2,400 square feet, 11 and 12-foot ceilings on here. We've got similar apartments like this at another community. I won't mention where and what, but we're getting over $3,500 a month for these penthouses. These are going to be nicer with a lot more amenities. We expect them to be a minimum of $4,000 for our penthouses. Our cheapest one-bedrooms are starting at $1,700, $1,800. So these are high-end, the nicest apartment community in all of Kansas City. But it's not just an apartment community. It has retail, it has commercial, it has homes, it has twin villas, it has it all. So let me get through some of these things here. All right. Okay, so the office rendering, once again, you saw it as we were going through the movie. You have some of these will be, if we can have someone rent the whole 3 stories, build a whole 3-story building of office, great. If not, we'll have retail on first floor. Second and third floor, we'll have office, depending on its needs. Here's a picture of our grocery store. Got a lot of movement in it, a lot of different products in here. I think it'd be a beautiful store. Here's some views looking down. I think the movie did a much better view of how these corridors and these main streets look going down. You got the green space in the middle of the main street. Over here looking towards State Line as you turn on Kenneth Loop. You've got 2- and 3-story office buildings, retail first floor, like we said, and office above it. Here's a better picture of our grocery store. We've got the fire lane out in front of the stores required by LDO, and then up here we've got parking for handicap and pickup. Pickup seems to be really big for the grocery stores now. And wrapping things up here, I do want to discuss the phasing a little bit. We do have phase 1 is the single family. Phase 2 is our apartments that are apartments and twin villas, very similar to Villa Milano. Through phase 3 is the purple buildings, the brownstones. Phase 4 are our luxury mid-rise apartments. 5 and 6 are the east side of the community. Both phases have a portion of living units. You got a living unit above here. You've got living units here. And then on phase 6, you've got the senior living here, and you've got work live here. So every phase has a little bit of everything. And don't think that we're going to, and I want to stress this, we're not going to go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5 and 6. Our goal is to get 1 and 2 going as soon as possible. As soon as we get 2 started, I shouldn't even say as soon as we get 2 started, as soon as we get approval, final approval, we will start marketing 5 and 6. As soon as we start getting enough traction that we can have enough to break ground on 5 and 6, we're happy to build out 5 and 6 as needed. At the same time, we're doing 1 and 2, 3 and 4, whatever it is. So we don't want you to think that it's going to go in this exact order. Okay. Yes, we've had some neighborhood concerns. You guys have already brought it up. I'm going to talk about some of the facts. I know that people are always afraid of the unknown. It's always the case. I'm worried about what's coming. I don't know. I don't believe it'll be as nice as he says it is. But I can tell you some facts here. The property values are not hurt in any way, shape, or form. Johnson County Appraiser's Office has stated over and over that there's zero impact on homes next to high-end apartment communities. Park Place proved that out. Across the street, their homes continue to go up. At Mission Farms, right across the parking, across from them, multi-million-dollar homes. They continue to skyrise. 4-story buildings right across from them. Didn't affect them in the least bit. Villa Milano, we back up, backyards to backyards to million-dollar homes. Didn't affect theirs. Their properties continue to skyrocket as fast as every other part of Leawood. So property values aren't an issue. Density, like I said before when we came in, I was told as long as you're under the 14 or 15 units an acre, you shouldn't have any problem. And keep in mind, you now have parts of Leawood that you're doing 17 and 19 units per acre. Yes. Oh, and Lashburg, I believe it's almost 12 units.
18.5 acres, 10.6 acres, units per acre.
10.6 units. 10.6 units the acre, right across the street. So our density is well within the allowable codes. We are 807 units below the 1,742 units allowed. Impacts on school. The schools love us because we're going to give them $5 to $6 million a year in property taxes. And per their own notes, they are, and you've seen it before, 75 to 80% of capacity. And they only expect 12 to 20 kids. Now that we've added some more single-family homes, it might go up a little bit more because single-family homes are what creates the kids at the schools. But we still see that as more empty nesters than anything else. The traffic. Yes, we're going to have more traffic than we have now. That goes without being said. When you guys originally designed, and I say you guys, the city of Leawood, I think you guys participated in the planning of the master plan. And you always figured this was going to be an area with a lot of density, a lot of traffic. And you design your streets, your schools, and the parks around a much, much higher density. Now that we're half the density, traffic shouldn't be an issue. As a matter of fact, the traffic report proves that the levels of service will not change. It can handle twice the amount of density. We gave the traffic report to your Public Works Department. They agree with what we said. They passed it on to their outside consultants, Olson Associates, and they've also confirmed the findings that the levels of service of the traffic will not change because of Cameron's Court. So once again, all I can do is just present the facts of what we expect to happen. In summary, okay, the team has worked very hard with staff over multiple meetings spanning months, if not over a year and a half, to design a plan that differs significantly from what was brought before you. And I do want to stress, it was always intended to be 4 or 5 different communities, and like you saw from other developers that were bringing product before you guys in the past, each one of them would have had it maxed out their one product. Now you have 3 or 4 or 5 products all maxed out. It's far better to have one at 50% density than 4 and 5 communities that are fully maxed out. So anyway, Cameron's Court has a sense of community, has a sense of place. We have a development that everybody will want to work, live, and play at. We are in compliance with LDO and the intent of 135th Street corridor, as staff has stated. We now have the grid street system. We have brought office and retail to the west side of the community and Chadwick Park. We've added residential components to the eastern side, which is why our number of units went up. For the most part, we still added some more. We have brownstones, we have condos over office space, we have live-work environments. We've added urban streetscapes to the site, creating improved walkability and an urban fabric as requested by the 135th Street corridor plan. We've created a markable, desirable Main Street feel. We've utilized the 3 different types of streets, the neighborhood streets, the active streets, destination streets. We've done this with a bare minimum of density that I've stated before. Minimum office, minimum retail, and half the allowable apartments. So the Odo Development has designed a unique plan that we believe not only meets the intent of the city's master plan for 135th Street corridor, but will also bring a much-needed housing options. I can't stress how much of a need there is for this product. At all of our communities, we're running wait lists for our high-end properties. You can't even get in unless you put your name on a wait list for November or December right now. That's how full we are for a high-end product of this nature. And this is going to be higher end than anything else I have in the city, and it'll be higher than anything else in anywhere of this city. Not only that is it a needed community, the additional property taxes for the city will be greatly appreciated. So as we stated before, it's designed with less density by ordinance. The levels of traffic do not change. It's got lots of dedicated natural zone with the required streets, grid streets, which was difficult to do. The plan creates over $10 million in property taxes for the school and city. And after 20 years of development around 135th Street corridor, this proposed plan is viable, and we can begin development immediately, beginning with the approval tonight. This plan meets the LDO requirements. You guys said before you didn't feel it did. Now that it does meet the LDO requirements, and now that it meets the 135th Street corridor plan, I really ask you for your support and a positive vote tonight in favor of Cameron's Court. I did that all by 7:30, and I opened myself up for questions or any other type of abuse.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Odo. We appreciate your presentation.
Do you have anything else to add to this? Thank you.
Our standard process would be to make or give questions to the applicant at this point in time. One potential approach, depending on what the pleasure of the commission is to go ahead and take a break now, have the opportunity for the public hearing, then have Mr. Odo have an opportunity to respond, and then have questions to him after we've heard from both the public and from Mr. Odo. But it's really, again, that's a departure from our normal process. So if any of the commissioners would prefer to go through our standard process, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Commissioner,
Chairman?
this is Marcy Knight with Legal. If I could just, point of clarification, you said a couple times about a public hearing. There's no public hearing. It's
Okay,
public
I'm sorry.
comment, just for the record.
But that's not what I'm talking about now, so let's not distract from what I'm wanting to do right now. In terms of
Mr. Chairman.
process, what is the commission's pleasure as to how to proceed?
That's fine.
I see Commissioner McGurran giving me the thumbs up. Commissioner Coleman has a little bit of a question in his mind, so I'm curious to get his thought on it. Commissioner Block?
I think that's fine to try to kind of move the process along.
Because we have a tendency sometimes to get bogged down in the questions, and I want to make sure we get the public to have the complete opportunity to speak there.
I agree.
Mr. Odo, do you have any objection to that?
I will do whatever pleases you all.
Okay. And then to clarify the point that Ms. Knight was trying to make, I did misspeak. I talked about a public hearing. It's a matter of public comment. There apparently are some legal significances to whatever we call it, but this is a significant enough issue for the city and for the commission that we've determined that it's appropriate to have an opportunity for public comment, and that's what we'll ask for next. Any other questions, or would this be a good time for us to take a break? If that's the case, we will stand in adjournment for about 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and come back at 7:45. On my list, The first member of the public to speak in terms of public comment would be Rachel Rubin. So Ms. Rubin, if you're around, we'll look forward to seeing you in about 7 to 8 minutes. We stand adjourned for the time being, or in recess. I'm not sure my microphone was on, so pardon me. So again, we're going to go into a period for public comment on the application in its fourth iteration, and we'll follow much the same procedure that we typically do when the public speaks. We'll be permitting 4 minutes for each member of the public who wishes to be heard, and when we get to the 4 minutes, I'll try to give you some sort of a high sign and ask you to pay attention to that and bring yourself to a conclusion. We've got a little bit of technology working here, so we'll see if it actually works very well, but we'll do our best. So with that, I would welcome Rachel Rubin. Ms. Rubin, if you could give us your address, we're anxious to hear your thoughts on this application.
Thank you so much. My address is 3105 West 132nd Street. I live down the street from the proposed Cameron Court. It's also known as High Drive. I'm in the Waterford subdivision. I wanted to point out, first of all, I want to thank you for your time, and you asked really good questions at the beginning of this meeting. And going to the revisions in this plan versus the previous iterations, there were 3 changes made from the last iteration. And I wanted to remind the commission that it voted on July 13th to deny or to not recommend this proposal on a vote of 4 to 1. So since July 13th, Mr. Odo has made 3 changes to the proposal, and that's it. The changes were, he added back in 29 houses, so he shifted those from rentals to ownership. He enhanced some landscaping, and there was a Kenneth Road adjustment. Those are the 3 changes that are listed in the notice that went out to the homeowners within 200 feet. So those are the formal changes that were made. And there are so many factors that were not updated or changed in this version. There was no change in parking. There was no change in the Main Street feel. I know at the last meeting, Mr. Klein put up a really nice video of what the Main Street feel would look like, and it was something I think all of us could be really proud of in Leawood, to have something like that in that location. The applicant has not changed anything in that regard. It's the exact same design as what he presented July 13th. The staff report states that there are opportunities for a Main Street feel in Phase 5. Phase 5, again, we don't know when that is going to happen. At a previous Interact meeting, the developer said that he would need a 50% sign-on from tenants before he could even consider Phase 5. There has been no feasibility study for Phase 5. That is the only portion of this development that is truly a mixed use. Phase 5, and I think now it's called Phase 6. That's the only part that's really mixed use. He's proposing a grocery store in Phase 5. We have Price Chopper right down the street in Leawood, a mile away, not even a mile away. And then we have Target and we have Walmart on the Missouri side. There really isn't a need for a grocery store. And we don't want a fast food location at 133rd and State Line. But going back to the density, the developer has stated many times he's well within the density, limits and requirements of the LDO. What he's doing is he's taking the mixed use regulations and he's applying it to this entire development when the western portion is 98% residential. The only mixed use is in the eastern portion of the development by State Line Road. Now, if he had to comply with the RP4 regulations in the LDO, and that's 16.2-5.7, the density would be 9.18 dwelling units per acre. That is what the developer would have to comply with in the western portion of this development in Cameron's Court. It would have to be 9.18. Staff has said it's approximately 12 dwelling units per acre if you just take the western portion. Now, if you take the whole thing together, assuming it all happens, assuming the eastern portion happens, then the density goes down. But we have no guarantee, there is no guarantee that phases 5 and 6 will ever happen. And there is great concern just because of the economy, changes in work habits. We don't need as much commercial space. We have a lot of retail space that's empty in Leawood. So I don't think that phase 5 is actually feasible, and we have no feasibility study to say that it is feasible. I wanted to comment on the Market Square, which is the Price Chopper shopping center. There were comments in the staff report that seemed to use Market Square as like saying that's part of the mixed use. Yeah, the western portion of the development is 98% residential, but we have Market Square across the street, which is retail. You can't combine the two. Market Square, Price Chopper, that whole development, they are not the applicant. They are not applying for rezoning. So we can't say we're going to use that portion and apply it to Cameron's Court. That's not allowed. I think I have to say that I'm surprised that the developer is coming forward and asking for tax breaks and asking for you to discount the cost of improving 135th Street. I really think that takes a lot of chutzpah to come in and ask for that. This development is very dense. It's the most dense development in Leawood as far as the square footage, as far as the acreage, and I just request that you recommend denial, or that you deny the application for the reasons.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Next on my speakers list, I have Steve Durr. Mr. Durr, if you're present, I think I see you coming to the doorway here. Welcome to the Planning Commission, Mr. Durr. If you could give us your address, we're interested in your perspective.
You're interested in my address, you said?
Yes.
My name is Steve Dewar. I live at 2211 West 132nd Street in Enclave at Cedar Point. Kansas City cyclists flock to 133rd Street. It's like a giant funnel, brings everyone to Leawood South Bike Loop, Geezer Park, or beautiful streets, and access to other bike routes. Tonight, you're considering a development plan that will eliminate 82% of the current bike lane between Pawnee and High Drive. This is part of the Leawood South Bike Loop, and we're losing a lot of our bike lane there. Last December, I spoke to the City Council in support of Public Works Cameron's Court stipulation to widen 133rd to provide for both safe turn lanes and extend the bike lanes by approximately 1/2 mile. I discussed several studies that showed bike lanes made the streets safer for cars, bikes, and pedestrians. The most comprehensive study was done by the University of Colorado, Denver. They took 13 years of data from 12 cities, including Kansas City, Missouri. Their conclusion: bike infrastructure is one of the biggest factors in road safety for everyone. After building bike lanes, many cities reduced fatal accidents by 40 to 50%. Portland reduced fatalities by 75%. And here we are in Leawood considering removing bike lane from our own bike loop while increasing traffic. According to Leawood planning, we will lose 1,000 feet of bike lane when the street is restriped for Cameron Court's turn lane. This is 82% of the current bike lane between Pawnee and High Drive, gone. The remaining 220 feet will be in 2 short segments squeezed between turn lanes. The many turn lanes, bike lanes, and offset intersections is creating a very cluttered street. This is just another distraction for both drivers and bikers. 58% of all bike fatalities occur at non-intersections. being sideswiped or run over by a distracted driver. This street layout is a tragic accident waiting to happen. When bikes and cars try to share the same space at the same time, the outcome is very ugly. The bikers are here to stay. We're not going anywhere. Elite Cycling at Mission Farms told me their sales were up 40% this past year. To top it off, the demographics that Mr. Odo says he is targeting is the same demographic that biking appeals to. If this project is approved, we will see even more bikes on the road. The first Cameron's Court traffic study said the C-Mart will generate 5,167 trips each day. Moving 70 feet to the east should not reduce that number to 0, as their new amended study says. Quick Trip has twice the market share of its closest competitor. It has a very successful points promotion with Price Chopper. When you exit Quick Trip, you will already be on 133rd, so anyone westbound is likely to stay on 133rd. Cameron's Court will only increase the traffic. So I know you've read your emails. People are taking their time to tell you traffic is already a problem. Let's not turn your backs on these people. Sometimes we need to step away from the engineers' graphs and tables and listen to the residents who actually live on the street. We know traffic will increase when the Quick Trip opens in January. We know a lot of bikers use 133rd. You have the information that bike lanes dramatically increase safety for everyone. Please do not approve a project the size of Cameron's Court without first providing for the safety and welfare of the citizens of Leawood. That would just be wrong. Lastly, we know this land is going to be developed, but we only get one chance to get it right. We don't want a development that just checks the boxes. We want a development we can all be proud to call our neighbor. In its current form, I don't believe Cameron's Court does that. I know Mr. Odo and Mr. Clover can do a lot better. Leawood deserves better, and Kansas City bikers deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durr. We very much appreciate your comments.
I do have one question. I might need someone to help me get me home tonight. It seems that according to the traffic plan, nobody goes east on 133rd Street, and that's where I live. So if anybody can help me get there, I would appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Durr. We'll look into that. The next speaker is Terry Durr. Terry Durr. Is Terry Durr in the audience tonight? Well, if not, we'll move on to Mark Casey. Mr. Casey, are you in the audience tonight? I think he's coming to the doorway. Welcome to the Leawood Planning Commission, Mr. Casey. Welcome.
Thank you.
If you could tell us your address, we'd be very interested in your comments.
My name is Mark Casey, 2204 Condoleezza Terrace. My wife and I have lived at that address for almost 3 years. We could have moved anywhere we wanted to. We chose the townhomes in Leawood South. They gave us everything that we wanted. We moved from the Tomahawk Creek condominiums, which would be somewhat like some of what's in this edition. It was too crowded. We just didn't like the situation. We wanted something with more room. We have observed this vacant land, which is the subject of this hearing, for probably 15 years. Our daughter lived in Wilshire Place, so we were in and out all the time, have spent countless hours with my granddaughter in Geezer Park. So we're very familiar with what's going on. We knew this land would be developed. There's no question about that. But we thought it would be developed in a way that would be consistent with the neighborhood. rather than this terribly dense plan that has been put before you. There are many, many issues, obviously, and I've come to the party late. I did, after Mr. Sanchez alerted me to the package, read almost all 1,000 pages through yesterday and today to get caught up with what you've been doing. And you've done a great job. You've had a lot to consider. There's been a lot of issues. I think they've been addressed over the past year from what I can tell in the reading, but I think it's really more basic than that. The purpose of the Leawood Development Ordinance is clearly set out in 16-1-2.1 states in part that this ordinance has been established for the purpose of promoting the health, safety, and general welfare of the community and maintaining a high-quality living environment. And is also developed to lessen congestion in the streets, prevent the overcrowding of land, and to avoid undue concentration of population. I think this plan as proposed in front of you violates every one of those precepts, and that's what this ordinance is for. Also, with regard to some of the things that Mr. Odo was addressing, I did read the RCL-CO plan that was in the packet, and especially on the executive summary, where they indicate that based on their assessment, that the 135th Street corridor plan, which was developed back in 2008, was overly optimistic both then and in the current market environment in 2019, and is based more on wishful thinking than any realistic assessment of what the market can bear at the present time. I think what we're seeing, and as the young lady prior to me stated, it's smoke and mirrors. They're trying to pull in this, maybe we'll do some development, we'll have retail or commercial, but that lets us bring in this dense apartment complex and all these other things. I suspect that in 5 or 10 years, we will see very little that has developed in either retail or commercial in that area. I drive on State Line numerous times every day, and I see all the empty storefronts, and I just don't see how this is going to be economically feasible for this to come in and have a lot of new either commercial or retail or office space. That just is not going to happen. But that's the vehicle that's being used to try to get this plan through. I think the other problem that you have on this is they talk about the traffic, and I've looked at the traffic study. It says that both 135th Street and State Line are already stressed, and as one who travels those all the time, they are clearly stressed. You now are going to stress 133rd and Mission, because the people that live in here, it won't take them long to figure out, if I turn north and go on 133rd, I can get out a lot quicker than going to 135th and having to deal with State Line Road. I'm 3 units off Sagamore Road, and I can already see where they will come on 133rd, they'll turn on Pembroke, they'll go right on Sagamore to 128th Street, and that's how they're going to start accessing State Line Road. So there's a lot of issues here that they're not addressing. So I would respectfully request that you deny their application. I know it's a difficult job that you're given on this. I guess I'm done.
Oh, continue. You can finish your thought.
Well, I just want to state one more thing. I come as a retired attorney, 45 years, city attorney for 40 years, in a town of 4,000. It's the only town of 4,000 in the country that has a Major League Baseball diamond. Dyersville, Iowa, Field of Dreams. So we went through all these planning and zoning issues. I was a city attorney through that. We got sued, ended up in the Supreme Court. We won. We followed everything. We did it how it was supposed to be done. And I think you can consider all these points I've made. I think they're all very valid to consider, to say, yes, this is an impact it's going to have on all these different areas of people's lives. and I would ask that you give that serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Casey. Next on my speakers list is Mr. Larry Gunja, who I think is participating by Zoom. Mr. Gunja, are you
That's
there?
correct.
I see you. Welcome to the Leawood
I
Planning
am.
Commission.
Thank you very much. Do you want me to go ahead and start?
Yes, if you would, please. If you'd introduce yourself by giving us your address, we would be grateful.
Okay, my name's Larry Gunja. I live at 13288 High Drive in Wilshire Place. For the record, I strongly oppose the developer's current plan for the development that he refers to as Cameron's Court. You'll likely hear a lot of opposition to this plan in regards to density, traffic, mixed use, as well as other issues. I'll leave that to some other of my concerned neighbors and friends. I'd like to comment about the disconnect between the developer and his team and the homeowners, whose concerns of how the density of his plan will affect their home values, the safety of their children regarding additional traffic, and the aesthetics of the surrounding area. I'd like to share some comments made by the developer and his team during the Neighborhood Interact meetings, Planning Commission meetings, and City Council meetings. I'll respond to those comments with my opinion, as well as with undisputable hard facts, and I will propose some questions to the developer regarding these statements. In regards to homeowners' concern about high density and increased traffic, Mr. Kurt Holland, an attorney representing Odo Development, stated, "I'm not sure the residents fully appreciate what the alternative would be if we did follow a pure mixed use." How condescending, Mr. Holland. Are you and the Odo team really that much smarter than us? Mr. Holland went on to say, "We're trying to work with the city." Well, how about working with the concerned homeowners? And finally, Mr. Holland stated, "I didn't really hear from the residents what the alternative would be, other than they just didn't want this plan." Well, what I heard, and what I believe everyone else heard, was that they want lower density, less traffic, and real mixed use. Mr. Odo has stated, "We had a lot of neighborhood interact meetings, as you know." Well, I know that the neighborhood interact meetings that I've attended amounted to what I refer to as the Odo show, where the developer attempts to tell us what we want. Mr. Odo has also stated most neighbors did not want to have retail between Kenneth Road and Pawnee. They wanted it at Mission and State Line because they didn't want traffic along 133rd Street. Well, what the neighbors actually said they wanted is single-family homes, lower density, and less traffic throughout our residential streets. They want a main street feel, walkability, with a blend of mixed retail, like restaurants, patios, coffee shop, bakery, deli, craft brewery. There's so many possibilities. Mr. Odo has stated, "We're adding 15 acres of parks. 9.4 will be open to the community." Well, paving a path within an already established natural habitat and claiming it as additional parkland and placing a couple of park benches in some unusable corners and calling those parks is not adding acres of parks. Mr. Odo, on 2 separate occasions, referred to Gezer Park as a hair over 10 acres with 1/3 parking and 1/3 pond. Well, go ahead and Google aerial view of Gezer Park in Leawood, Kansas, and you decide if the parking lot and pond make up 2/3 of Gezer Park. It's laughable. And then he also stated we're providing 17.5 acres of park space compared to Gezer Park's 4.5 acres. On Leawood.org, the city's website, it clearly states that Gezer Park is 10 acres, just as the developer had stated at a prior meeting. Mr. Odo said, "We're adding park space for everybody, and we also have 35% green space, which exceeds the minimum 30%. Well, you actually aren't adding park/green space. Mr. Odo, a huge part of your 35% green space is natural habitat that already exists. Other than the proposed Chadwick Park that I would like to add right now is less than 1 acre. What amenities do your parks provide for the community? Is there a playground, shelter house, picnic table, barbecue grills? At Gezer Park, there is a playground, 2 shelter houses, a stream flowing into a pond, restrooms, a garden, public art. On the large green space, you can play all kinds of lawn games. You can even fly a kite. High schoolers flock to Gezer Park to take homecoming and prom pictures. Will your so-called parks provide amenities similar to any of these?" Mr. Odo has stated, "We're at 1/5 the density allowed by the LDO." Well, everyone, it seems, except your team, can plainly see you're at 1/5 the density allowed only if you count the east side of your plan along State Line, which isn't actually real mixed use. And at the June 8th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, after hearing criticism from concerned homeowners regarding his many misrepresentations and omissions of facts, Mr. Odo clearly and publicly stated, I'd like to respond to some of these. You talk about lies and not being true. I want to respond to them. I assume he's referring to the homeowner's criticism of his plan. That's right, everyone. He called us, concerned Leawood homeowners, liars. The developer has not reached out to homeowners, at least not in Wilshire Place, about what they really want and don't want, as he claims. His revised plans have always been in the hands of the Planning Commission before he goes through the motions of conducting an interact meeting with surrounding homeowners. His comments and his actions toward concerned Leawood citizens is why his integrity, or rather the lack thereof, is being questioned. I hope you can now understand why so many homeowners oppose this plan. All of the quotes that I have attributed to the Odo development team can be verified in the minutes of the Leawood Planning Commission meetings and the Leawood City Council meetings. I urge all of you on the Planning Commission to decline the developer's zoning change request on this parcel of land for all of the above reasons. I thank you for your time that you have provided me to share our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Gunja. Next on my list is Max Galloway. Mr. Galloway, are you on the line?
I am.
Welcome. If you could tell us your address, we'd be interested in your sharing your thoughts with us.
Yes, I live at 12729 Overbrook Road in Leawood South. I'm not going to regurgitate what everybody else has said because it's pretty much unanimous. I'd be shocked if anybody else tonight is actually in favor of this from the community. The process it's kind of got an amazing amount of similarities to Bill Murray's movie Groundhog Day to me. We, the taxpayers, continue to virtually say the same thing and get the same proposal, except when they add more apartments. The only difference that I share with Bill Murray's perspective is that everyone that we talk to has the same opinion. The death of brick and mortar is well known across the country, and that's been brought up from other places, from other people, I should say. Mission Farms is a good example, and even right adjacent to the property that the proposed space is going. We do not want more traffic. We do not want more apartments. Mr. Otto has passed the requirements of the LDO. What he has not done is pass the desires of the current community, and I don't think he cares to. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. We appreciate your thoughts and coming forward to speak this evening. Next is Dan Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the Leawood Planning Commission, sir. We're interested
Thanks
in your
for
thoughts.
having me. My name is Dan Goldberg. I live at 3089 West 132nd Place with my wife and two children. We live within 200 feet of this proposed development. I think there's two primary reasons why this proposal should be denied. And I think you've heard these themes. I'm going to echo them because I think they're the important ones. First, the density. This is an astonishing amount of apartments within Pawnee Street to High Drive, over 900 apartments. We just have to sit there and think about that number. I mean, it's astonishing in so many regards. Earlier this year, the city of Overland Park faced a proposal at Ranchmart. Should they allow 190 apartments, a fraction? They said no, and it wasn't even close. And Ranchmart's a very dense area already. Here we have a pristine area that we are going to just mega crowd with nothing but apartments. And they're called different names, and there's a shtick to it, but you can't call it what it clearly is, just a lot of apartments. And second is the mixed use. Again, this is just a sham. We've been talking about this for years now. At least in the beginning, they would call it horizontal mixed use. They've just dropped that. It's all in one area. And in my neighborhood, Wilshire Place, we have less than 200 units. And now we're going to be faced with something that's just massive and unfitting for the community. We want Mission Farms, we want something like that. We keep on saying that, no one listens. And it's hard to feel empathy for the developer, and it's hard to feel empathy for the landowner when this can be developed, I think, economically viable in a way that everyone can make a lot of money and make it fit for the community. So for all these reasons, I think the city just needs to keep on sending the same points, work with the community, make it better, make it fit with what Leawood's about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. The next person on my list is Rick Robinson. Mr. Robinson, are you here?
I am, sir.
Welcome to the Leawood Planning Commission.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Rick Robinson, and I live at 2216 West 131st Street in Leawood in the Enclave subdivision, which is a small community of 24 wonderful households that are good neighbors and, more importantly, friends. I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a representative of the HOA, although my wife and I support and endorse the statement that our HOA submitted reiterating our previous concerns and objectives and are now objecting to the changes to the Cameron Court plan, which include a move of the Kenneth Road entrance to the east and the drive-through fast food restaurant at the corner of 133rd and State Line. I would like to try and create a visual for you, if I could, of 133rd Street and State Line intersection. This is an intersection that is about 300 yards east of the only in and out entry exit from our subdivision, which is Overbrook Road. The only way to get into that drive-through restaurant that's being proposed from State Line, which is where people will be when they spot it, is by the entry off of State Line at 134th Street or by the entry from 133rd Street and Kenneth Road. So you have a fast food restaurant that people see but may not know how to get to, and they start looking around and trying to figure out how they can get to their cheeseburger. The entrance at 133rd and Kenneth that they have to use is only 200 feet west of Overbrook, our only entry and exit. Those cars are going to be lining up on 133rd Street to make a left turn into the Kenneth Road entrance, and we will be severely limited with our ability to enter and exit our subdivision. Moving Kenneth Road to the east in this plan exacerbated the problem. Here is the visual I would like to use as an analogy. How many of you have taken your kids or grandkids to Chick-fil-A at 135th and Metcalf? Cars are snaked around all over the place. It is a mess during the lunch and dinner hours. I would think that the OP Planning Commission and City Council would probably like to have that one back. Now, directly across State Line from this proposed fast food restaurant is a Quick Trip that is currently being built. We all know how great QTs are. Cheap gas, cheap food, which means lots of traffic and hardworking people, and their trucks are everywhere. We don't have any control over what Missouri does across the state line, but we certainly need to understand the impact it has on our community. And I want to say very emphatically, you do not need to be a traffic engineer to figure out that 133rd and State Line intersection would turn into a total safety disaster under this plan. I checked with the Leawood Police Department to find out how many accidents have occurred at 133rd and State Line, and they reported that since January 1st, 2018, there have been 38 accidents at that intersection. That is almost one a month. And that is only the southbound lane of State Line. Kansas City, Missouri responds to the northbound lane accidents, and I do not have any of their information. Now, you add Quick Trip on one side and a fast food restaurant on the other that people cannot easily figure out how to get to, that's going to be a problem. The developer has created a moving target with the commercial section of this project. As others have pointed out, he has said publicly many times that he personally will not be involved in the commercial end of the development. The plan includes this so he can meet all the mixed use criteria outlined in the LDOs and the 135th Street corridor plan. Okay, I understand that. He said that the drive-through restaurant was required to meet city plans. However, Mr. Klein, the city planning director, has told us that the city is not requiring that. So that leaves a lot of questions for us in the enclave as to what is really going to happen on that end of the development. We have been told that many of the unusual provisions included in the plan, like the drive-through restaurant or the convenience store in the previous plan, would require special use permits, which would require other public hearings, which is all well and good. But if you approve this as it is, I ask you, how would you feel as a Leawood resident who lived close to a project that the city had approved, but you aren't sure exactly what has been approved or what is really going to happen? It's uncomfortable at best. One last thought. As we look across state line from our neighborhood, we see a highly commercial, somewhat unattractive business area. Okay, that is that side of the state line. We live in Leawood, a community that we are all proud of because it's nice, safe, appealing to the eye, and has so much to offer its residents. When I drive across state line from 150 Highway in Missouri heading west, and then it turns into 135th Street in Kansas, it feels different and good. The same is true if I come from Lowe's across 133rd Street. It feels good to come into this community. These are gateways to our city. Do you want the first thing that someone coming into our beautiful community to see is a fast food restaurant? I would hope not. Please demand better of any development and ensure that when people cross the state line into Leawood, they go, this is different. This is nice. I want to compliment you all on the commission for what you do serving our city on the commission. It's a thankless job that shows your commitment to keeping our city the great city that it is. So thank you for your service and dedication. You are special citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your perspective, Mr. Robinson. Next is Ryan Brunton.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Mr. Brunton.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Ryan Brunton, and I live at 3144 West 132nd Terrace in Leawood. I am a resident of the Wilshire Place subdivision, which is the subdivision immediately north of the apartment complex component of the proposed development. I recognize there are other Leawood citizens who would appreciate the same opportunity to speak, so I'll keep my comments brief. Quite simply, it is my belief that the Cameron's Court plan continues to be incompatible with the surrounding areas and neighborhoods. This commission agreed with that position 2 months ago. Mr. Odo's current plan is not materially or different than the version you denied. And as a result, I respectfully ask for your denial of this latest plan. Throughout this 16-month process, the surrounding neighbors have asked Mr. Odo to consider and address several areas of concern. Among the chief concerns are the unnecessarily dense nature of the western portion of the project and the lack of an adequate buffer between the neighborhoods to the north and the high-density apartment complexes within the western portion. At every turn, Mr. Odo has ignored the reasonable requests of the surrounding neighborhoods, refusing to make any change to his plan unless the Planning Commission or the governing body specifically rejects his proposals. Mr. Odo has been instructed by members of this commission and by members of the governing body to work with the surrounding neighborhoods to find a creative and cooperative approach to development of these parcels. To date, Mr. Odo has failed to follow those instructions. So let's focus on specific issues. In 2020, Mr. Odo presented 2 versions of his Cameron Court plan that included a 34-building, 662 multifamily unit project on the western portion of the property. At each public hearing in 2020, planning commissioners and or governing body members remarked that his original project was too dense. At one of the governing body meetings, governing body members remarked that the project was nothing more than, quote, a sea of apartment buildings, end quote. Instead of 34 apartment buildings and 662 multifamily units, Mr. Odo's current plan now proposes 37 apartment buildings and 834 multifamily units. Those numbers represent a 30% increase in the residential density from his 2020 plan. As was noted earlier tonight, the density of this project at its size is nothing like Leawood has experienced to date. And in essence, this plan would develop the density of 2 to 3 park places right on the doorstep of the neighboring residential subdivisions. We continue to ask the following: how does this revised plan address the concerns of the Planning Commission and the governing body? And how does this revision address the concerns of the surrounding neighborhoods? The answer is simple. It does not address any of those concerns. Mr. Odo is stubbornly committed to pushing as much residential density as he can possibly put on the western portion of the project. With respect to the adequate buffer, we all recall that Mr. Odo's 2020 plans included a 2-row buffer of single-family homes in the northwest corner of his project. That buffer was well received by all, and everyone asked him to extend the RP2 buffer all the way to the Cornerstone Church. And in fact, in a governing body meeting, he was specifically requested to, quote, extend the RP2, end quote, to, quote, provide more buffer in transition. Fast forward to 2021, and Mr. Odo's plan eliminated all of the RP2 buffer, replacing it with a single row of duplexes. Of course, everyone, including this commission, noted great disappointment with that decision, and recognizing his folly, Mr. Odo now offers some limited RP2 in the northwest corner of the project. But I would like to again remind the commission that this single row of single-family homes is basically half of the buffer that Mr. Odo proposed in 2020. In total, Mr. Odo took the one portion of his plan that was universally liked and turned it into a net negative. His latest changes to the project don't even return the buffer to what it was offered in his 2020 plans. If Mr. Odo feels he needs duplexes as a different price point, he could certainly place those duplexes in between the RP2 homes and the large partner buildings, but of course he won't do that. Lastly, the 135th Street corridor plan and the Leawood development ordinance both require Mr. Odo to include retail and office uses in order for his western portion project to be eligible for MXD. Mr. Odo continues to fight this tooth and nail, and his latest plan makes no changes to retail and office uses at 1.45%, with 98.55% residential use on his project. In exchange for his modicum of mixed use, Mr. Odo packs 12 residential units per acre onto his portion of the project, and has been noted tonight, the density of his plan is greater than would be allowed if this was purely a multifamily project. Mr. Odo continues to use the eastern portion of the project in all of his calculations to say his density could not be lower, which is misleading and an inaccurate depiction of the true density for the surrounding neighborhoods. At the end of the day, Mr. disguise a multifamily project under the cover of MXD, and in doing so, he attempts to circumvent Leawood's zoning requirements. While I recognize the developer and its consultants may believe this to be the case, this dense multifamily project is not the highest and best use of this land. This land represents one of the last parcels of undeveloped land remaining in Leawood. I do not believe Cameron's Court, which is essentially an 850 apartment complex, is truly the type of project envisioned by our city and its residents for one of the last undeveloped pieces of land in the 135th Street corridor. The citizens of Leawood, particularly those residing in the surrounding neighborhoods, deserve better. For these reasons, I respectfully ask the Planning Commission to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Mr. Brunton. Chad Summers. Welcome, Mr. Summers.
Thank you, Chairman Elkins. We have got to stop meeting like this. My name is Chad Summers. I live at 2608 West 131st Street in the Greenbrier of Leawood. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I got to tell you, this has been kind of a roller coaster of a meeting for me because I showed up with some prepared comments. After listening to like an hour and a half of the developer, I took like 3 pages of notes furiously, and I was about to pitch those comments and address the notes. And then a dozen of my neighbors who were really thoughtful and planned what they were going to say and came in with cohesive arguments, reminding the body of how you voted in the past. Really put me in a position to just hit a couple key points that are really gnawing at me and are kind of stuck in my craw. Chairman Elkins, I want to start by thanking you and the other commissioners for some of the questions that you asked of city staff right off the bat. That right there has led me to believe a little bit that maybe we're all wondering the same thing. I was a little concerned about the difficulty in identifying with city staff exactly what the number of allowable units would be if this were appropriately submitted as an RP or residential zoning project, as opposed to, as Mr. Brunton so eloquently called it, a multifamily development in disguise as MXD. I think that we need an answer to that. And I think that Mrs. Rubin suggested that the MXD or the RP4 would be considerably less. I think we need to verify that. I have to admit, I was a little frustrated this morning when I dug into the staff report and saw that staff had capitulated and was now recommending that you approve this proposal. And I started asking myself, how could this possibly be? And then I thought about it for a second and I realized it's not that hard to understand. Mr. Klein, the new city planner, shows up and in his very first commission meeting, here's a developer in town threaten to sick hut on him, issue veiled threats about litigation, claim that they're being treated unfairly by city staff, and then proceeds to get worn out over months and months and months. And these are city servants. I don't blame them for not wanting to fight with Mr. Odo anymore. But I'm asking you to stick to your guns. I'm asking you to keep in mind the threats that have been made. Maybe most importantly, the threat to the homeowners who opposed him on the first iteration. And he point blank said, you either go along with this proposal or I'm going to jam one down your throats that's got 100 more apartments. At least he was a man of his word on that item. So if you drive west on 435, if you drive north on I-35, take a look around. These buildings that are being proposed are not uniquely Leawood. They are not adding to the distinction of our community. You can literally see them decorating the freeway on I-435. How does that help us continue to grow with distinction? I'm asking you to help us, the residents, maintain our pride. This developer has bullied us, has bullied staff, has threatened us and delivered on those threats. We are trying to protect us, protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect the city. Help us find dignity in this process, because up until now, it definitely seems like the process is stacked in the developer's favor. I could go on, but I won't, because I know other people have something to say. But I think it's interesting to consider a comment that was made by Mr. Logan, actually, Mr. Rainier's lawyer. And he commented about the developer's history in the community. And I have to agree with him. I think that the developer's history makes a difference and it counts. In fact, history is the best predictor of future outcome. Mr. Odo's history in this city, when he gets the green light to develop something, is to sue us. Don't let history repeat itself. Help us maintain our pride. Show us some dignity in this process. Please vote to deny this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Summers. We appreciate them. Next on the list is Kyle Becker.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm here today to talk a little bit about, first of all, my address is 2649 West 132nd Terrace. So I live in Wilshire Place, just north of 133rd in the proposed development. I agree with my neighbors and fellow citizens that this will be developed. I also agree with them that at over 100 acres, we should do it right. My big concern is pedestrian usage of 133rd. As a walker and a runner and a cyclist, I use that road quite a bit, and it's already a major safety issue. There's not a single crosswalk between State Line and Mission Road, which is 1.3 miles. And in addition, the sidewalk doesn't continue on both sides of the street, so you have to cross it at least twice. If Mr. Odo puts this in with his staggered entrance and exits, not only is it going to be impossible for cars to make left turns safely onto 133rd, but it'll be virtually impossible for pedestrians to do so as well. I mean, just the other day, my wife and I were trying to cross with our dog and our daughter in a stroller, and traffic doesn't stop. In fact, somebody sped up and honked at us. So, I mean, here we are trying to put close to 1,000 homes in with complete disregard for pedestrian traffic flow across 133rd, which is already quite busy. So I'd urge you to decline this until you can guarantee or, at least consider pedestrians and cyclists. I would also echo what my fellow citizens have said about this being a bit of a lipstick on a pig. In full transparency, this is the first time I've had a detailed look at this. I know you guys have been looking at this for over a year and a half. It's pretty clear that Mr. Odo is going to shove a bunch of apartments in here, not build the retail, and we're going to be stuck with a dud. I mean, there's already empty stores to the west and east that they can't fill. Churches moving in and the rest. So when all that retail sits empty, but we're dealing with the traffic, that's not going to be a great outcome. So I know it's a tough job, and having him come back again isn't going to be a ton of fun, but I do urge you to decline his request.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. We appreciate your perspective. Chris Nelson. Hello, Mr. Nelson.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. My name is Chris Nelson. I live in Wilshire Place at 13282 High Drive. I've spoken at the last 4 Planning Commission meetings. I have attended all Interact meetings and have submitted written comments to all Planning Commission meetings. My objections remain the same. Planning Commission, along with the governing body, has urged the developer to get input from surrounding residents. There has been no meaningful dialogue between the residents and Mr. Odo. These Interact meetings are primarily run like timeshare sales presentations. The Q&A at each meeting results in a fact-checking exercise where residents correct the record on Mr. Odo's misrepresentations. I have yet to see any meaningful changes made to this project as a result of neighborhood input. This development is too dense. The most significant change in the current plan compared to the original plan has been to increase the number of living units by 44%. This will result in a virtual sea of apartments with several 4-story buildings that will dwarf the surrounding single-family homes. Traffic and congestion that goes along with these new residents will overwhelm our neighborhood streets, particularly High Drive, which is a heavily traveled shortcut between 133rd and Mission Road. Cameron's Court is nearly identical to Mr. Odo's recent development in Lenexa, Sonoma Point. In fact, the only real difference is that the Lenexa development has actual mixed use and is only 670 living units. This development is bordered by 435 on the west, commercial properties along 87th Street to the north, and duplexes to the south and east. I asked the commissioners, how does taking Lenexa's leftovers fit with Leawood's motto, growing with distinction? Over the past 25 years, I have lived in Lenexa, Overland Park, Prairie Village, and for the past 15 years, Leawood. With each move, I felt like I was improving my quality of life. I understood that living in Leawood meant I would pay higher taxes, but I would also benefit from Leawood's many amenities and thoughtful city planning in return. Cameron's Court takes full advantage of Leawood's infrastructure of parks, schools, streets, public art, and the surrounding neighborhood and gives nothing back in return. I ask the Planning Commission to reject this application for the good of the city and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Mr. Nelson. We appreciate it. I'll go back to Terry Durr was on my list. Is she here or on the phone? Does she wish to be heard? Are there any other residents that wish to be heard? If not, I want to express my appreciation of the residents who did speak. We very much appreciate their input. Oh, looks like we got someone coming in right under the wire. Come on in, sir. You could state your name and your address for us. We would be grateful.
Yes, Mike Perry, live at 3210 West 138th Street in Tuscany Reserve, and came tonight not really prepared to speak, but after hearing what I've heard, I felt I had to. And my wife and I just learned about this in about a week or so ago. So, we were shocked to hear something of this magnitude and size was going in where it is. or where it's proposed. Couple points, I mean, I virtually agree with almost everything that everyone else has said here, but a couple of points I wanted to bring up. You know, Prairie Fire to the west, Phase 1 opened in 2014. Phase 2, 7 years later, is finally starting, okay? So clearly there must have been some sort of demand issue or some ability to fill that land in that time frame in a timely manner. And we're talking about an extremely larger project than Prairie Fire with this one, okay? So, you know, again, how long is it gonna take to complete this if it were to be approved, which I am opposed to it being approved, let me state that. You know, it doesn't fit Leawood, it doesn't fit the level of lifestyle here. You know, you bring in apartments, just the amount of traffic alone is going to be phenomenal. My wife and I travel 133rd Street regularly, going to a gym where we work out over on State Line, and that is already fairly heavy in the mornings early. We sometimes go that way to avoid 135th because it is so busy in the mornings when we go, and also at, you know, rush hour in the morning and evenings. So adding another, you know, 1,000 residents in a 1 mile section, it would be ridiculous to deal with that on a daily basis. Not to mention, you know, the safety of residents and more accidents and everything. And I don't see where widening 135th from State Line just to Pawnee, what does that do? I mean, I would assume the city would have to pay for extending it the rest of the way down. Otherwise, you get a bottleneck. So again, you're creating more traffic issues with that design, in my opinion. And you know, I don't have a bunch of fancy stats or anything to back all this up. I live in the area. We travel it daily, and I don't know why they can't just build more single-family homes there of the level that are surrounding it. You've got 500,000 to well over $1 million homes on the north and south side of 135th Street bordering this property. It's insanity to me to do this. And I just hope that you guys will consider that. I don't know if any of you live in that area, but you should come over there and spend a couple of days. It's just, there's just no way that kind of density is gonna fly. I mean, it just won't be good for the neighbors or anybody that lives there. And I hope you guys agree and will not approve this. You know, I'd like to throw out a couple ideas. I happen to be in the real estate business, market new homes out south in Overland Park. You know, we're selling homes in the 600s to about $1.5 million range. And I don't know why this couldn't be west of the church, you know, nicer villas or single-family homes or a mix thereof. That little project that Jim Lambie did there, that a couple of people have spoken that live there today. I can't think of the name of it, the Enclave, I think it is. That sold like hotcakes, you know, and I think it would develop faster. We would have more quality housing there that fits Leawood and fits what we all currently live in and would expect to see around us. I would think that would be the place for the single family, and then apartments and commercial maybe on the you know, the west side of the church. That's an ideal spot right on the corner, in my opinion. But what do I know? I've only been selling real estate for 36 years, and it's just I don't know. We were stunned. We were stunned, and I hope you deny this project, or at least require some revisions along the lines of what I've suggested. or something similar. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Perry. With that, I would invite Mr. Odo and his team to return and to offer any comments and rebuttal to what we heard from the public, and then to stand for questions from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Curtis Holland again. Thank you for the opportunity to make a few comments, and I think Mr. Odo is on his way back in here. You know, I do appreciate some of the comments that were made by the residents. By and large, they were respectful. Some I'm not so sure about, but, you know, I know it's an emotional issue for them. And so, you know, I understand that part of it. And, you know, I think it is a little bit unfair to say that we haven't made any changes. In fact, over the year or more that we've been at this, we have made changes, many changes, and we've talked about some of those tonight, and I'll just mention a few of them. We've removed the private gates, or the gates that people, the staff didn't like. We've preserved more trees. We've created more natural green areas by moving buildings. Removing Kenneth Road, for example, helped. Changing Chadwick from a public through street, which would have destroyed a lot of trees, to a park setting. We've enhanced the buffer along 133rd Street. I know there's some disagreement about what that should look like, but it's very challenging to fit this property to match and to bring it into conformance with the 135th Street Community Plan, where we're being asked and told, rather, to put in grid streets. You can't put in grid streets and also have the same kind of single-family development buffering that was suggested earlier. Did we try to put in some very nice twin villa buildings there as you know, an opportunity, a different, another living opportunity? Yes, and we heard from the folks and from you all about the single family, so we did put them back in. Every discussion and change we've made has been in response to either what the residents have said or what the Planning Commission have said, the council, or really the staff. We've made a bunch of changes again. We've added retail to the west side of the project. You know, it's a little strange to hear, you know, you're not adding enough retail, and then, you know, also hearing that there are empty retail stores, so why are we adding retail here? And in large part, it's because this is what the city decided would be appropriate for 135th Street. The 135th Street Community Plan is what dictates the development and what the city wanted to see here and envisioned to be developed along this corridor. It's not just, let's go build up some more single-family homes here along this corridor. Could we do that? Yeah, but that's not what the city vision was. We're trying to match what the 135th Street Community Plan requires and strongly suggests, and has been really strongly suggested by the staff and by the Planning Commission, and by, frankly, a lot of the residents say, follow that plan, follow that plan. And we did, and now we do. We are following that plan. They may not like it, and you know, we're here at our 6th meeting, and we actually have a staff recommendation for approval, which I think is very important for you all to consider. We were in front of you, and there was some hesitation about whether to support it or not in earlier meetings because we didn't meet the LDO, or we didn't meet the 135th Street Community Plan. And now we do. So in our opinion, we've done a lot to improve the plan. It's not exactly what the neighbors want. We understand that. But it is following your LDO. It's following your planning guidelines, your 135th Street Community Plan. That's what is shown there, and that's what we were told to do. I want to talk a little bit about density. We've been hammered with the density question or issue. We can't really pick and choose what part of the 135th Street Community Plan we're supposed to follow and which ones we're not, or the LDO requirements. There's been some statements that aren't exactly accurate as with regard to what the density is here or would be for an RP4 development. An RP4 development would allow for a 10.89 dwelling units per acre. That's what it says in your LDO. We're less than that in our plan. We're playing exactly by the rules that are set out in the LDO. and in the 135th Street Community Plan. The density here is literally half of what it could be. And some people like to focus on the west side versus the east side. It's a full, entire plan. And we followed all of the rules when we submitted the plan, and we've worked very diligently with your staff to comply with the rules. And we do now, and that's why staff is making a recommendation for approval after many, many months of making changes to the plan. I attended a lot of, well, every meeting, I think, the Interact meeting, maybe not all the HOA meetings. There was no bullying or threatening going on in any of those discussions. I found those comments a little bit unfair to make because that's not Mr. Odo's style, and that's not what was said. There wasn't any threats. You know, I guess it's an emotional issue for the residents, and I get that and I understand that. But I think we, as you as a body, need to stick to the facts of what this is. We aren't removing bike lanes. In fact, we're adding bike paths to the development. So a lot of this stuff, I'm not sure where it comes from. Again, I think it's an emotional issue, and so we're hearing some of that come through, and sometimes it's, you know, I guess fair to say that sometimes it's not always accurate what's being thrown at us in that regard. But again, I understand it, and I appreciate those concerns. We, I think, did the best we could in terms of trying to answer your concerns, staff's concerns, and we think we've come back with a plan that's beautiful. I mean, I don't know how you can watch that video and find this thing to be so objectionable, frankly. I mean, it's a beautiful project. It can't all be built at once. Yeah, we have to phase it. It's going to take a little time, but it's got, you know, pedestrian walkways, connectivity, open spaces, park spaces, different living options. There are retail. There is office components here. There is a main street. You know, we can't go and negotiate how we're going to develop this with, you know, a bunch of residents that live within the area. There's not really any unanimity among them about how it should be developed. There's, you know, we heard a bunch of different versions of what they would all prefer. But we did meet with them, and we did talk with them, and we did take their concerns into consideration, and as best we could. And with that, again, I just want to repeat that I want you to really sort through some of this and look at the facts of the case and try the best you can. I understand there's emotion here, but try to set that aside. Your job and role is to evaluate the plan and the rezoning request in accordance with your guidelines, with your regulations, the golden factors, which the staff did a great job on. And again, we recommend or hope that you recommend approval to the City Council. And I think, Mr. Odo, if you'd like to make a comment or two, do you want to say anything?
All right, on a point of order, as Mr. Odo comes forward, we're reaching the 9 o'clock hour. Is there a motion to extend our meeting by 30 minutes?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Coleman.
I move to extend the meeting for additional 30 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. In response to the roll call, Commissioner McGurran.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Block.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens. Aye. Commissioner Hoyt.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
The ayes have it on a 6-0 vote. The meeting will be extended until 9:30. Mr. Odo, comments? And then hopefully you'll stand for some questions.
No, I feel comfortable with what we've said before, so I'm just here to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Odo. Appreciate that. We'll start tonight with our commissioners on the phone. Usually I make them wait until last, but Commissioner Hoyt, Commissioner Peterson, do you have questions for Mr. Odo or his team?
Mr. Commissioner? Mr. Chairman? Let me allow Commissioner Hoyt to go first.
Okay.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So a couple of questions for Mr. Odo, and then after we're done with questioning him, is that when we'll have questions, further questions for the staff?
That would be great.
Okay. So a question about Chadwick Park. Is that part of phase 2?
I believe we're showing, yes, with phase 2, yes. Phase 2
Okay.
or 3 or 4, whichever one goes in there first. It'll be done with, however, I say that, and I'm thinking in the last revision, I think Public Works, I'm looking at Mr. Klein now, did Public Works require that to go in with the beginning of any phase over there?
And actually, I'd have to defer to Public Works, but I do think that they wanted to go in first.
Okay, and if so, I'm not going to argue with staff on that at all. Whatever they want me to do, if they want me to put it in with it in the beginning, I'm happy to do so. Because we're probably going to do 1 and 2 at the same time anyway, so it won't matter to me.
Okay, it just kind of looked like from the drawing, it was part of phase 2. And who will actually own and operate that?
Well, the Chadwick Park,
Chadwick Park.
it'll be owned by the Association of Cameron's Court,
Okay.
which will be made up of all the homeowners and the commercial owners and property owners within the area.
Okay. And so in spite of the fact that Chadwick Park would be constructed as part of phase 2 theoretically, does there have to be a certain critical mass that occurs in terms of people being in that Association of Cameron's Court before it's viable to program that?
I think that's a very fair question, and we haven't really gotten that far. I don't know if I'll have the critical mass at phase 1 and 2, but certainly when we put in 3 and 4, we would be able to. I would like to be able to do so, especially if I could build the kiosks with 2 or so, possibly. That's one of my thoughts, so that I can do, because I really think Chadwick is going to be something everybody's going to want. But I do have to make sure I have enough of the streets built out so that we have parking on street parking there before I would open up Chadwick, because if I open up Chadwick as a community event center, I think it's going to be so successful that I definitely will need the street parking in place before we do that. So that is something I will work closely with staff on what they want me to do, and I'll open it up as soon as I physically can, because I think once I open that up, I'll be able to fill up the rest of things even faster. So my goal is to get that opened as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, I think it's it's definitely a nice amenity, and I just know from having some experience with facilities like that myself, they're actually a lot more complicated to run than you might think they are. So, I think it's a great thing to do, but it's going to take some resources to really do the programming on that.
We'll have to have a full-time person assigned to just the programming and running that and getting events and sponsors and everything for that. It's being done by other communities similarly. We'll do the same. And I've been going to a lot of the other places during their event centers and taking notes and seeing who's there and everything. And I'm sorry for me looking around because I'm trying to find the screen where Ms. Hoyt is speaking, and I don't see her up on any of the screens here. So
I'm a disembodied voice out there.
You're just a voice.
Moving on to another question. Phases 5 and 6.
Yes.
You said would be marketed as soon as phase 2 gets underway.
Right.
And who is that? I mean, are you going to be the person who markets it, or who is actually going to spearhead that?
I will be working with Mr. Rainier and they've got a real estate team that markets retail and office. So I'll be working with their team to help act as the developer on that as well. The idea of it being all by itself was dropped early on. We've been working, Mr. Rainier and I have been working very closely on everything. He's been a great partner, and I want to continue that partnership with him, and we'll continue it. So did I answer that? So 5 and 6, we will start marketing, and I think I corrected myself. So sometimes, as they said, I make slip-ups. We all do when we're up here, we're nervous in front of talking to people. I believe I recanted it and restated it as, we'll start marketing 5 and 6 as soon as I get approval from City Council so that I can start marketing this. We will break ground, as stated before, because it is such a large area. I don't think it'll sell out day one, and no one can afford to build those things unless you can't get loans for it until you get at least 60% pre-sold, pre-leased. And yes, we've done the market studies, and yes, we've already talked to a few retailers that are interested over here. So I think it could work, but no one wants to get serious about conversations until I have an actual plan. Why waste time with the big retailers until you actually have something in hand that's feasible, that they can start putting LOIs on and leases in place.
Okay.
And this is all
just
stuff
one-
that, and I just want to stress, I've done this multiple times before, so I know how to do this. And I love the retail as much as I love the residential component. I've done subdivisions, done apartment communities, I've done retail, I've done office, and I do a lot of warehouses. Obviously, we're not doing warehouses here, but anyway.
Okay. And then one final question, and maybe this is something that the city will have to get more involved in addressing, but we got a lot of letters from the public on a lot of different, subtopics here. And there certainly was a collection of them that dealt with the loss of a South Loop bike lane. And my question is to get clarification on, what about this is going to lead to a loss of a South Loop bike lane? And a related topic, you showed a bike trail going through Cameron's Court as proposed tonight. Will that bike trail connect to the South Loop bike trail? We just really spent a lot of effort, the Parks and Recreation Department did, on mapping out that whole North and South Loop bike trail. And I would hate to see something jeopardize that.
So I heard that comment tonight. I have no idea where it came from. I think there's a few other comments similar to that where they're stated as fact, but we have no idea what's going on. I'll even defer that again to Mr. Klein. We've talked. I said I would work with him on any bike loops, street crossings that need to be done, and we're not removing any of the bike trail. As a matter of fact, there is no bike trail in front of the church. So we are putting, don't quote me on this, but roughly I'm looking at this at about 1,600 to 1,800 additional lineal feet of bike trail. So right now you don't have anything in front of the church. Now you'll be able to go all the way through Cameron's Court and pick back up at 133rd. So you have a continuous bike trail. Is that true, Mr. Klein?
Actually, this development, the developer is actually increasing the width of 133rd Street. We have talked with Public Works about it. As a result, there will be some bike lanes that will be removed with this project to allow the through traffic. However, Public Works does have a project in the future where they'd put in bike lanes that would go all the way from Pawnee all the way over to State Line Road. So the Public Works Department is proposing, as far as to install those bike lanes, it would be in the future, probably, I believe, around 5 to 7 years is what I've heard.
Oh, wow. So what you're saying is there will be a disconnect then on the current south bike loop?
And there's some current breaks in it right now as well.
Well, there are current breaks, but I want to stress, and you correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, the only breaks we're going to have is crossing Chadwick and crossing High Drive. We've got to have an exit out onto 133rd. And so the only removal of, quote, bike lane is those entrance exits.
It's due to, as far as the turning movements, as far as, and
The
so
left lane and
that
right
pushes
lanes
them
going in
and
there.
eliminates some of the bike lanes.
And we're given easements so that future growth can happen for those bike lanes.
So in the future, the Public Works Department has stated that they will be provided when the Public Works Department actually widens 133rd Street.
Has Brian Anderson been involved in these discussions?
Yes, he has. And in fact, he's the one that I was talking to. Unfortunately, Brian couldn't be here tonight. And so Carrie can answer is here in his stead.
Okay. I would think if this project moves forward, I'd go back to my point before, and that is that we were shown a bike trail that goes through Cameron's Court. I would say that definitely ought to connect with the South Loop bike trail, and that, all this hard work that Brian Anderson and his effort over the last several years has involved in really thinking about the safest way to do these north and south loops. I would certainly want that to be embedded in this implementation and, you know, sooner rather than later.
And
But anyway, okay, I'll sign off on my questions for Mr. Odo, and I have another question or two for the city later.
Sure. Commissioner Hoyt, I do want to stress that I've talked to staff and told them we will work with you on the bike trails, and he can confirm that, and that is our intent. What you're saying is what we're planning on doing. So we, you know, in addition to the low traffic streets that we have internally that people can do bike riding, and a lot of sidewalks we'll have as well. So Mr. Klein and staff and I have been working closely on trying to do the bike trail, so we are maintaining the safety of the bike system.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Hoyt actually asked a lot of the questions I've already wanted to ask. And the only additional thing I would like to add on to that is in looking at you've gone from the single-family homes, then you went to the duplexes, then you went back to the single-family homes along the 133rd Street. But you also have, the brownstones. What I'm a little uncertain of, and it's a little confusing to me, and maybe you can clarify it just real quickly. If I'm looking at the brownstone, may I be a purchaser of the brownstone or a renter or both? And same thing with a single family.
Our single family will definitely be for sale. We're planning on doing the brownstones for sale as well. So that's our intention, because I think there's a good market there for both those. Because I think there's a real market for 2 and 3 bedroom brownstones that are between 1,800 and 2,000 square feet. That'll be around $400,000 to $500,000. I don't know if they'll hit the 500, but probably in that range. But that's what our intentions are to do.
Good. Hey, as a matter of fact, one thing I really do like about those brownstones, which I think is an interesting concept, is you've got on the first floor, you've got the retail on a couple of the buildings, not all of them, but a few. And given that there's 935 potential residential units in that area, one of the things that in thinking about what type of retail would be attracted to that area, I think there would be a sheer demand for a beautiful little boutique wine store, like, Chateau Lafite Leawood wine shop or something. I would think that it would be a big seller right there.
Well, I would love to have a wine store. I know there's a liquor store already by the Price Chopper, but I really think a brewery, a small brewery. I've already talked to 1 or 2 local people that have places out in Shawnee, and you're not getting their leftovers. They have very nice places out there, and I think I'd love to see another restaurant out here. I also have in mind a sushi house. It's one of my favorites in town that I would love to see have an additional restaurant out here. I've got a lot of restaurant contacts that I would like to see have either, if not an additional location, a new look for a new restaurant out here. I think there would be a huge need. But the only thing that's going to drive more retail, and I hate to say this, is more residential. And that's what it's going to take. And we've got the right mix of residential and office and residential communities. One of the things that we've had a problem with, and I might jump ahead, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Peterson, but we've had a whack-a-mole situation. You've heard it talked about. No matter what we did, if you remove this or you do this, you create a problem with the LDO. Well, if you do this or the 135th Street corridor problem, you create a problem with the one or the other. You're always the whack-a-mole. You've heard us talk about this, and other people talk about it. We're the first community to be able to come through without hitting the whack-a-mole. And the only reason why is because we truly have such a low density. It allowed us to have the room to do the stuff that we needed to do. So anyway, I'm really glad we were able to overcome that. Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, it gives you the flexibility because of the lower density, quite frankly. But also at the same time, I am very, very impressed with, granted, this technically is the 6th time we have met on this issue.
And we keep improving it each time.
And the governing body has met already 4 times. They're going to be going on a 5th. But the difference between the very first time you made your case and presented it and looking at it today, I truly see a much better, for lack of a better term, Main Street feel in this development that you have presented tonight than from day one. And there was an awful lot of work that you went into it, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Other questions for Mr. Odo and his team? Commissioner Coleman.
Mr. Odo, can you please go over the drive-in restaurant with the entrances on the northeast corner, where State Line 133rd are? There's some questions on that. Is there access to State Line, or to access the restaurant, do you have to go on 133rd?
Okay, if I can have my, would you have a site
he'll put
plan
it
of
in
this?
right
Okay,
now.
perfect. Okay, so can you see my little arrow here?
Yes.
Okay, this is where the drive-in is. We have a right in and a right out through there that lines up with the shopping center to the north. We are allowed only one entrance that's a true in and out on this street from State Line, and it had to be, we couldn't do it any further back then. It should have probably lined up with the enclave across the street, but they've asked us not to do that. That was the closest we could have had it. So we had to move it to the loop, with the Kenneth Loop. So this is where I'm getting in a whack-a-mole situation with the residents. They say they don't want it to line up with their street across from their community, so we moved it down to Kenneth, and now they don't like it because, or a few people don't like it because it, you know, they don't like that location either, but we have to have one location to enter in on the east side. So we only have 3 entrances from 133rd, the Kenneth Loop, High Drive, and Chadwick. And so the traffic coming from State Line would be going west, and then you enter on the loop and come back into the drive-through, and then you would be able to do a right out back to State Line. And people learn to do this real quickly, but once again, this was dictated by either way they're going to have to come past it, because you can't have a left turn within so many 100 feet of State Line because of the stacking of the stoplight from State Line. So all we're doing is meeting code. Yeah, please.
Henry Clover Architects. I wanted to explain too nowadays everybody sees a pad and they see drive-through and they think it's fast food. In this day and age, I am a national architect, do national work for companies, Panda Express, Pasadena, California, all over the country. One of the requirements nowadays is, even with nice restaurants, is they want the ability for people to order and pick up. And so it's not your traditional, particularly in this day and age with COVID and stuff like that, it's not your traditional. We're putting nice restaurants in that will have orders and pickup. So this is basically a queue to pick up your food you've already paid for and you've already ordered. And that's very, very common nowadays. So it's not our expectation it's going to be a traditional Wendy's, Popeyes, that sort of thing. It's the hope that we can market this to the better restaurant qualities. They're called QSRs. That will have the ability to have food picked up by ordering it and going home. And that's really the whole purpose. And it's going to be a special use, so you're obviously going to see it, but it was never our intent to say, okay, we're going to put a McDonald's on the corner.
Okay.
That's not what the intent is.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Other questions, Commissioner Coleman? No. Nope. Commissioner McGurran?
Thank you. Just one. Just as a show of your good faith over time, as the developer, will you maintain and fund the shortfalls of the HOA and not transition it to the homeowners until all the phases are completed?
That is a great, great question. The way I've set up my associations in the past is everybody starts paying their dues from the beginning based
Correct.
upon their percentage. And I always cover all the unsold, vacant, anything that hasn't moved in yet, so that no one pays more than pick a number, you pay 30 cents a square foot of land, or pick the number it is what we estimate to be on down the road. You start with that, and I always fund that. And that's very typical how most developers do.
Until the completion of all the phases?
And I can tell you, all the commercial properties, the office, the retail, put it in their leases just that way so that they're not paying an exorbitant amount the first few years. So we set it up, and I would, of course, do the exact same thing with the for sale products.
So I haven't
as
heard
well.
you say it yet.
Yeah.
Through the completion of all phases?
Yes,
Okay.
always.
So there's not a chance that the Homes Association would be transitioned to the homeowners at a point in time, for example, where 5 and 6 never get developed?
No, we would not do that to them. They'd have
Because
to
you
pay
would
an extra
continue to
amount.
pay their portion
That portion.
from that point on?
Yeah, we would
Thank-
always work together.
Thank you.
And that's exactly what I've done at other communities.
Terrific.
Thank you, Commissioner McGurran. Other questions?
I have questions for staff along with Commissioner White.
Okay, I've got those.
Okay.
Mr. Odo, a question that has come up, and you may have already answered it, but I want to put a fine point on it. So if we go back to the very beginning of this process, kind of the first thing that your team brought to the table was the land use study that Mr. Rainier had done to describe some of the challenges that were out there over the 50 years that he and his family's trust have owned the property. And I may be misquoting it, and if so, I apologize, but the sense that I took away from that, in the for what it's worth category, was that the idea of either retail or office or other commercial was very difficult, if not impossible. And there was some pretty strongly worded language in that report as I understood it. Is that a generally fair characterization of what was in that land use study?
You're trying to use my words against me? I would say that I didn't think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, originally this was required to be 20% office, 20% retail, and I said that's not feasible. And you guys agreed that that was too much, there's not enough need for that type of, now obviously we have the ability, as if we see that we can get something, great. But you reduced it down to 5. Now 5%, I think I can get a little bit more than 5, that's why I have 6.9. 15 is going to be a push on the office. But I will join hands with you guys and making a commitment to get that there. But hopefully, I know how development works. You got to bring in the residential component first, then the retailers and office want to be, and office doesn't want to be the first one out there because they don't have any place to go to for lunches or something like that. So to give that work live, you got to start bringing in the retail, you got residential, the retail, and then the office component is generally how it works.
And that's exactly where I was going with the question. So the linchpin to, and you've talked repeatedly and very eloquently about the way in which you've dealt with, and you and your team have dealt with the density requirements and have touted the fact that you're way below on the density. But the linchpin to that is the designation of your development as a mixed-use development, right?
Well, I disagree with that thought, where I think you're going with it. I believe it is mixed use, and the question of how many units I have on the east side versus the west side, everybody knows I'm well below the number of residential units on the east side. On the west side, my math came to that we were like 11.2 or 11.3 units per acre, and if it was an RP4, I'm allowed 10.89, but what I have a problem with is picking and choosing what parts of the LDO of a RP4 of the, you can't pick and choose quite like that. And Mr. Sanchez said that earlier. It's not really fair. I'm following the rules that I was told to follow, and the 130th Street corridor, and the grid system, and offset the streets, and all the things that people have been asking me, the high-level stuff that the neighbors asked me, offsetting the streets. Anyway, I can keep going.
But at the end of the day, all those things are triggered by the designation of the zoning as mixed use. I mean, you talk about the LDO, but everything that you've been asked to comply with is a function of the zoning of this property as mixed use. Isn't that correct?
If I, pardon?
I understand it's part of the comprehensive plan, but it's also, you've regaled us with the challenges of whack-a-mole and the LDO versus the plan.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what is triggering, you're triggering this whole thing based on the zoning of MXD.
I don't understand.
Because if you didn't have MXD, you couldn't rely upon the 15 units per acre. You'd be left with much less than that.
And if I was, okay, so that's where I thought you were going with. If you were, now you're breaking it down to 11.2 versus 10.9. I'm so close that that it's really not a difference in anything you would see in reality. So I don't think, I mean, people tried saying I was way off by, I don't know, you heard some of the stuff, but we're really right there. And that type of, 10.89 versus 11.2, I don't think anybody can say is enough to make a difference. When, if you're talking about the linchpin, I wouldn't say that at all.
So at the end of the day, though, to what you're really telling us, or what I'm hearing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, what I'm hearing is that this is truly a case when we're talking about the commercial development on the east side is a case of if you build it, they'll come. If you build the residential on the west side, then that's what, you just told me, that's what's necessary in order for you to have a successful commercial development on the east side.
Okay, if I build the residential, they'll come, because there's demand for it. Every study says that. I'm at 100% occupancy. The good products are 100%. Park Place, Prairie Fire, they're all at 100% occupancy. There's a need for the residential units. There's a need for single family, for the twin villas, for the brownstones, everything. There's a need for all that. Once that's in place or on its way coming, and they actually see dirt moving, retail will want to follow that, because then they'll say, so yes, the linchpin is residential, but it has nothing to do with MXD. It's the linchpin of residential comes, follows by retail, followed by office.
And again, I wasn't being critical. I was just wanting to establish the fact that this is a case that we're banking on. If you build the residential, then the commercial
Will
and all that
follow.
goes around it will follow.
Yes.
And that's in fact what the play is here.
That is the play, and it's been that since the beginning. Thank you. I wasn't, sorry for jumping back.
Again, I didn't want you to imply that I was being critical about that.
Okay.
Final point of order here, and we're getting close. I think we're going to make it tonight, but is there a motion to extend our meeting one more time?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Coleman.
I move to extend the commission for an additional 30 minutes till 10 o'clock.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Commissioner McGurran?
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman?
Aye.
Commissioner Block?
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens?
Aye.
Commissioner Belzer? I'm sorry, Commissioner Hoyt. I almost made it through the night. Commissioner Hoyt?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
The ayes have it on a 6-0 vote, and we're extended to the maximum time of 10 o'clock. Let me check my notes one more time here, Mr. Odo. I think you've answered almost all the questions that I had written down.
But I do want to just follow up on that last question. We are absolutely not using any type, as is suggested by other shenanigans, to get extra density because of an MXD by any means, and I think that proves out by our ratios.
Again, this is a clarifying question that seems to have come up fairly regularly in the minds of the public comments that we received, both by email and in person, and that is, you in fact are the developer for the commercial aspects of this as well as for the residential, correct?
Yes.
And you have the development rights along with, in partnership, in some sort of relationship with Mr. Rainier.
In some sort of
particularly on the
relationship,
commercial
yes,
side.
we're co-developing.
Okay. All right, I think that those are the questions I have. I know that a number of the commissioners have questions for staff, but before Mr. Odo steps down, does anyone have additional questions for Mr. Odo? All right, if not, Commissioner Belzer or Commissioner Hoyt, I'll go back to you. And you had a question or two for staff, as I understand it?
Yes, thank you. And really, my question relates to the stipulation objections for 11D and 37 that the applicant raised. So I wonder if you would comment and respond to, what the applicant said about objecting to stipulations 11D and 37.
And staff talked with the applicant. Staff is not agreeable as far as what they're proposing. With regard to the severability, that has always been used within the city. We've had that language in there, and I think that it's something that served the city well, and I know that legal was part of the original authoring that. And then with regard to the double dipping, I think Mr. Curtis Holland even indicated that that's an ordinance that we've had. It's always been collected that way. Other development that has gone along 135th Street is constructed both the third lane along 135th Street as well as pay the 135th Street impact fee.
Okay. So just to make sure I didn't mishear you, because sometimes I get a little bit of static here. So you said you are not amenable to the changes that the applicant wanted. You're sticking by your guns for 11D and 37.
Correct. And
Okay, thanks.
if I may, Commissioner Hoyt, I know that you had a question with regard to the Chadwick as far as when it was going to be constructed and how far, and there was a
Yeah.
comment made about Public Works. On the overhead projector, I have the phasing plan. It's actually, I believe, the last plan in your packet, and it's actually on the overhead as opposed to the computer.
I think we had it up, Mark.
There we go. And so if you look on the first phase, it's a single family that's located there. The Public Works Department did require that Chadwick be constructed at least down to that first east-west street that's just below 133rd Street to provide access so the homes could access that street. And then in the second phase, that's kind of shown in the green, the rest of the infrastructure would be constructed at that point. And I think as far as the brownstones currently, as far as in the current phasing plan, are shown as phase 3.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Klein, just a follow-up question there. With respect to the joint and several liability question, was that provision in the ordinance by which we approved Park Place?
I believe it was. I remember I did go back and check to see how far back we've been using it, and we've been using it for quite some time. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but it was getting close to that period of time, and that was back in 2003 and 2005.
And at Park Place, though, we didn't have any single-family residence as part of that mixed use, did we?
No, it was always apartments.
And what about, and I never can remember the name of the development, I'm sorry, but the one at 135th and Row on the northwest corner, that Parkway 600? Parkway Plaza?
Parkway Plaza.
Was that provision included?
I believe it was.
Okay.
That was actually in about 2006, I think.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Coleman, I think you had questions for staff as well.
Yes, I'll just throw this out there for anyone who wants to answer it. The last version, staff did not recommend. This version, staff did recommend. Can you go a little bit more into that, and what is the difference maker between the last version and this version that caused you to go from recommending denial to recommending approval?
And so during the first two plans that we had all looked at, that was when staff really recommended denial. It wasn't until the second to the third when they started putting in the grid streets. And actually at the last planning commission meeting, staff really didn't have, we didn't really choose a side. We didn't choose to deny or recommend approval. We kind of left that up to the planning commission and the governing body to decide. And so with this plan, with the shifting of the entry on tract 5 and then the addition of the single family homes, and then even back in the last plan, they did shift some buildings to keep some of those existing natural areas. And so that kind of all just built up to a plan that staff was then able to recommend.
Okay, my memory must be shot from I thought you recommended denial of the last one, but obviously I don't have the mounds of paperwork that we had from that one, so I'll defer to you on that. My second question, one of the slides Mr. Odo put up was a percentage of the development. He said, and I'm going to round his numbers, 7% retail, 15% office, 78% residential. Is that accurate? And that's the overall development.
So I believe right now our numbers show that the total development is around 77% residential, 15.5% office, and around 7% retail.
Okay. So I'll round, and we're in the very close ballpark.
Sure.
Okay. My question is, if we split this between the east and west, what do you have percentages for that?
We do. And so if you do split it west, you have around 0.8% retail, 0.7% office, and it is around 98.5% of residential.
Okay. And then how about that was the east side?
That was the west side.
The
And
west
so
side.
if you look at the east side, that one is very much more mixed use. And so that one has around 20% retail, around 50% office, and then around 30% residential.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
And Mr. Sanchez, that 30% residential includes the 100 unit assisted living as residential, right?
I believe so, yes.
Which for density purposes, we're not including the assisted living as residential, true?
Correct. Basically, assisted living doesn't meet the definition as far as for a dwelling unit in the Leawood Development Ordinance is having a kitchen and a bathroom. Also, typically, your assisted living doesn't have the same kind of impacts that, for instance, apartment complex would. People generally aren't driving as much, so you don't have the same kind of parking requirements for that, and you just generally don't have the same number of trips that would be generated by a typical apartment complex.
Again, not being critical, but for some purposes, we're counting it as residential, and for other purposes, we're not counting it.
Correct. It is listed in the Leawood Development Ordinance under Table of Uses under the residential portion of it. It does have different parking requirements. It does require a special use permit as far as in the different zoning districts.
And I don't know that it's telling this case, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
If I can get one other clarification based on the chairman's question. So does the 935 dwellings include?
No, it does not include as far as the
assisted
units,
living.
as far as the bedroom units of the assisted living.
Okay, so the 935 is not.
The 935 is the live-work units, the brownstones,
Okay.
the two-story and the four-story apartments,
Okay, thank you.
and the single-family and the duplexes.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for staff or for Mr. Dodos? Then I think we've brought ourselves to the point for discussion. And I'll look to our friends our commissioners on the Zoom call if they would like to comment first. And as part of the comments, I would invite commentary on the two stipulations as well. I'm not sure how to handle that, whether we ought to take those up separately or whether we should include them in the overall consideration of the plan, but I'll kind of make that determination based on what I hear from all of you as you're commenting. So Commissioner Hoyt, you want to start?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's been a long haul, hasn't it? And I want to commend the residents for their, really intense attention that they've paid to this, and not just for a short period of time, but over the long haul, because it's hard to sustain that, I know. I think this is a much different plan from my analysis than the first plan that came to us. And one of the things that I really appreciate is the attempt to create a sense of place, because that was something that was pretty much entirely missing in the first iteration of this plan. And I really want to thank the staff for all their efforts. And just for the record, Mark Klein is so experienced in this. He is definitely, maybe in name, the new planning director, but he's been at this and particularly serving the city of Leawood for a very long time. And I really appreciate his leadership and all the hard work that the staff has done in this regard. One thing that really troubles me is the huge disconnect that continues to exist between the applicant and the residents. And I know that it's, common to think that residents, when they get involved in a situation like this, are only reacting out of, a basic fear of change or inability to change. But I think there have been a lot of very thoughtful comments offered. And I've tried to process that along with everything else that we've received. I have to say, I think this would dramatically change the nature of this section of Leawood, and not for the better, in my opinion, in terms of the impact that it would have on the neighborhoods. And these are not just one or two households. It's not just one or two even neighborhoods, but it's a whole community of neighborhoods, really, that I think might be dwarfed by this. I'm just doing the math. You've got 935 dwelling units plus the additional 100 beds or 100 rooms that are part of the assisted living. According to the city's formula, that would probably be over 2,300 people in this really relatively small space. I know it meets technically the density requirements, but I think you have to factor the scope of this in terms of the sheer volume of people compared to the volume and nature of the surrounding areas. So, these are the things that I'm wrestling with, basically. And I am really disturbed that, I don't know, I wasn't part of these Interact meetings. I haven't been part of the HOA meetings, so I wasn't there to see what the dynamic was. I've tried to read the accounts of the Interact meetings, and there didn't always seem to be a lot of detail provided in those accounts. But I would certainly love to have seen some really meaningful coalition, maybe, a steering committee or something that would be composed of people who are key in the surrounding communities along with the applicant. And I know the governing body had suggested continued input from the residents, and I'm just not so sure that the technically required Interact meetings ended up being the best vehicle for that to happen in. So anyway, those are some of the things I'm thinking.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoyt. Commissioner Peterson.
I like Commissioner Hoyt also view the from the first presentation till to today's. There is a significant difference here, which I absolutely appreciate. I'm not as much concerned about the addition of 935 additional residential units in that area. That's a very large area. But the way it's laid out, given the topography of that property, that's an awkward property to deal with. And when you look to the south of what has been approved to go in, I don't see much of a difference between, the Cameron's Court versus the 135 complex, including the not really assisted living, but the retirement home living on the south side of 135th Street. Um, that to me has less of a sense of space and purpose than Cameron Court does. I see much more of a purpose to it, and much more of a community to what the Cameron's Court complex represents. You have you have some retail. It's dispersed here and there, but it appears to me to give a better feel for a community of retail, residential, and office within a space, frankly, than does Park Place to me. The brownstone concept, I personally like very much. I can see where those would be very saleable if anything. So my personal feeling is I appreciate the staff's recommendation of this. I do think the stipulations as written should stand. And I really do think we should approve this.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Just a time check here, we're at 9:45, so Commissioner McGurran.
I'll try to go fast so we can make sure we get our vote in. In my opinion, tonight's update does not change the following facts. 1, this is not the mixed-use development the city has requested or needs. 2, the meeting the minimum required standards is not good enough, not acceptable. 3, almost all of the neighbors involved are opposed, a key consideration. For these reasons, I will vote for denial.
Thank you, Commissioner McGurran. Commissioner Stevens?
Chairman. Thank you. I'm, I guess, also related to the past, especially, I'm still of the opinion that the past July submission made significant improvements to the plan, and that this even current resubmission further adds to it by the various 3 to 4 adjustments that has been spoke about. There is a reduction in the overall density and a reduction in the total square feet of building development. There's reduction in the residential dwelling units has been noted, and the expanded diversity of the options given for housing, I think, is a great thing. And then also there's been an increase in the amount of open space or green space area as well. And so maybe most importantly, the application as noted tonight by others and the staff's report is that it now does meet all the requirements of the LDO and meets more elements of the comprehensive plan as well as the 135th Street community plan, and again is a main factor in the stated recommendations, I think. So with that, I would be in support of a recommendation for approving the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Block?
So I too am glad to see that the proposed development now complies with the LDO and more closely with the 135th Street Community Plan. Those are both important for my consideration of any project in this space. However, I do continue to dislike that the development is bifurcated, with residential basically on one side and mostly commercial on the other to meet the mixed-use threshold. I don't like that there's a lot of opposition from the community either. However, I don't think that adding more commercial to the residential side will lessen the main concerns of homeowners to the north, which is traffic. Arguably, more commercial in that space would only create more traffic and make it less desirable, I guess, if that's possible. Other concern that we heard is the proposal is too dense. However, the comprehensive plan has shown mixed use, as we heard tonight, for over 10 years. That's appropriate for this part of the city, and the density is one of the key components of a mixed-use development. So when considered together, the west side and the east side, obviously, as I mentioned, the project does, and we've heard, does comply with the LDO as far as density is concerned. Well, I too have had my doubts about the completion of the commercial portion to the east. I am encouraged to hear, at least the first that I had heard, I was not at the July 13th meeting and did not hear that Odo and Rainier were teamed up on that eastern side. I'm encouraged that there's some joint effort on that side. I do like the cohesiveness of the western portion of the project, and now, as we saw tonight, I guess that spills really more so over into the eastern side. I think if this were to not be developed under this proposal, I think we risk what's happened in past years on the south side of 135th Street, where you've had developments that have started and stopped, and they've not complete. I think having one developer developing it all cohesively makes the most sense. So therefore, I would move to advance the proposal if there is a motion, and I think that I think the governing body should sort out the whether they're double dipping or what on the fees. I think, if Lashbrook was required, we advanced that proposal and the governing body did, and if that's how that was treated, they should be treated the same. And the severability is, I think, should stay if that's in other proposals as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd first like to thank the public for their input, for all their emails and their in-person comments. I will tell you, I personally read them, and I'm sure everyone else, I'm going to speak for everyone on this one, that everyone else is reading all the emails that we get from everyone. So, and each round, I should say, the new ones, we definitely go through. Just one note, I know Commissioner Hoyt was talking about how many people additional persons that this project would bring forth. Using Mr. Sanchez's calculation of 2.5 people per unit, that gives us 2,338 individuals, give or take, that are going to be in this development. My biggest issue is with the neighbors. Every successful project that I've seen come through, we have neighbors and the developer hand in hand, almost singing kumbaya. And the ones that haven't, there's been a couple here and there where some people in the neighborhood have some valid issues, but it hasn't been like this. I've never seen so much opposition to a project since I've been on the Planning Commission. I mean, what I want is a win-win situation where the neighbors come with the developer to all agree on going the right way. We don't have that. We have a win-lose situation instead of a win-win. That's very concerning to me. In my mind, we have two different developments. We have a west side with 99% residential, and we have an east side, which is a true mixed development. And just on the offshoot of apartments being built, I do have a concern with that as well. It's been an issue in the Overland Park mayoral campaign recently about building too many apartments there. The city of Shawnee, I read, recently rejected an apartment complex with neighbor opposition and opposition from their city council. Developer came back with townhomes, which, as I understand, ultimately passed as trying to meet the needs of everyone. So with that, I still have big concerns about this project coming in.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Well, for my part, I'm fairly well torn here. And this discussion over the last several months has really been sometimes frustrating, but very helpful. And I thank all the work the staff has done, all the work the applicant has done. And I thank all the committed time that the residents have made, because it really has had an impact, even to me tonight, as I've kind of flip-flopped from one side to the other as I heard all the arguments. And I will say that at a personal level, this feels like it is too dense for what we need or what we should want for this space. But having said that, the thing that has come across to me after the questions, and I got very good, precise answers from staff, which I'm very grateful for, as well as from the applicant, is that, well, I guess the second point I'll make is I'm still not convinced that this is true mixed use as it was contemplated by the governing body, or as it was contemplated by the comprehensive plan and the 135th Street corridor part of it altogether. But I will say this, the thing that I've kind of concluded, or I have concluded, is that if this was to be true mixed use, and it was put before us in that fashion, we would be looking at even greater density than I think we're looking at here. And so to the extent that I'm concerned about the density that is proposed here, I'd be more concerned if another developer came in with a more traditional mixed-use approach and I want to say take advantage, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but made use of the, whatever it is, the 15 units to an acre perspective. So to the extent that it's one of these things where I guess I'm concerned about, careful what I ask for, because the next one that comes in may have a lot higher density and be in absolute compliance with the provisions of our LDO when it comes to mixed use. So for that reason, at the end of the day, I think I land reluctantly, but albeit reluctantly, in favor of this plan as it's been put to us. Again, that's a fairly reluctant yes there, but that's kind of where I land. So with about 5 minutes left in our life before we all turn into pumpkins here, do I hear a motion one way or the other?
Mr.
I'm sorry? Commissioner
Mr.
Peterson.
Chairman? Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve case 49-20 Cameron's Court, request for approval of a rezoning from AG Agricultural and SDL Planned Office to MXD Misuse District, preliminary plan and preliminary plat located south of 133rd Street and west of State Line Road, including all stipulations 1 through 41.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, was that Commissioner Block? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion with respect to the motion to recommend case number 8221 to the governing body for approval? If not, we'll move to a roll call vote. An aye vote is a vote in favor of advancing the application with a recommendation to approve. A nay vote is a vote essentially recommending a denial. So Commissioner McGurran.
Nay.
Commissioner Coleman.
Nay.
Commissioner Block.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Nay.
I'm sorry?
Nay.
Nay?
No.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
The vote is 3 in favor and 3 against the motion to recommend to the governing body for approval. The chairman votes yes, and the motion passes. Case number 82-21 is recommended to the governing body for approval. Again, my thanks to everyone who was involved in the process tonight, and it now falls to the governing body to see how we proceed. Is there any other business to come before the commission this evening? Again, thank you all. We stand in adjournment.
Thank you.